The moment Caleb Turner saw his 6-year-old daughter Lily reach for another man's hand on that beach, he knew his late wife's final wish was about to collide with a stranger in a red bikini who looked like she was daring the world to break her. 3 weeks after burying the love of his life, grief had driven him to the ocean searching for air he could actually breathe. But what he found instead was a woman whose eyes held the same drowning look he saw in his mirror every morning, and a little girl who would teach his daughter that families aren't always born. Sometimes they're built from wreckage. Before we dive into this story of loss, hope, and unexpected second chances, I want to invite you to join me on this journey. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel and connecting with all of you. Now let's begin. The beach at dawn belonged to ghosts. Caleb Turner had learned that truth 3 weeks and 4 days after he buried his wife. The exact number mattered because his daughter Lily asked him every morning how long it had been since Mommy went to sleep forever. And he couldn't lie to her, couldn't round down or soften the mathematics of grief. 25 days, 600 hours, 36,000 minutes since Sarah's heart had stopped in the hospital room while holding his hand, whispering that she loved him, that she loved Lily, that everything would be okay even though they both knew it wouldn't be. The sand was still cool beneath his bare feet as Caleb walked the shoreline, his running shoes dangling from one hand. He'd given up on actually running 2 weeks ago. Now he just walked, sometimes for hours, while his mother-in-law stayed with Lily back at the rental house they'd taken for the summer. The house Sarah had booked 6 months before the cancer came back, before the 3rd round of chemo failed, before everything turned into a countdown he couldn't stop. "You need to get away," she'd told him during one of her clear moments near the end, her hand thin and cool in his. "Take Lily somewhere beautiful. Don't let her remember this summer as just hospitals and sadness. Promise me, Caleb." So here he was, keeping that promise, walking a beach in a coastal town where nobody knew him, where he could be invisible in his grief. The early morning belonged to joggers and dog walkers, people with routines and purposes, people whose worlds hadn't imploded. Caleb envied them their normal problems, work deadlines, relationship drama, whatever crisis felt consuming until you learned what real loss actually meant. The sun was just starting to burn off the morning fog when he saw her. She stood alone where the dry sand met the wet, wearing a red bikini that seemed too bold for 6:30 in the morning, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She wasn't swimming or sunbathing or doing anything that made obvious sense. She was just standing there, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the water like she was trying to make a decision about something. Caleb almost walked past. The last thing he wanted was human interaction, the awful moment when someone asked how he was doing and he had to choose between lying or watching them become uncomfortable with his honesty. But something about her posture stopped him, the way she stood so still while the world moved around her, like she was an island of quiet in the chaos. She turned before he could look away. Their eyes met across 30 feet of sand, and Caleb felt something shift in his chest. Not attraction, exactly, though she was beautiful in that raw, unpolished way that had nothing to do with makeup or performance. It was recognition. The same exhausted, barely holding on look he saw in his bathroom mirror every morning was staring back at him from her face. "You're going to hurt your neck if you keep staring like that," she called out, her voice carrying over the sound of the waves. There was no flirtation in it, just a flat challenge. Caleb felt heat rise in his face. "I'm sorry, I wasn't judging?" She raised an eyebrow. "Because that's usually what people do when they see a woman alone on a beach at dawn in a bikini. They create whole narratives in their heads." "I was actually thinking you looked like someone trying to decide whether to go in or not," Caleb said honestly. "The water's probably freezing." Something flickered across her face, surprise maybe, that he'd answered instead of walking away embarrassed. She turned back to the ocean, and Caleb knew he should leave, should give her the privacy he'd have wanted if their positions were reversed. But his feet didn't move. "It's 62 degrees, she said after a moment. "I checked before I came down. Cold enough to shock the system, but not dangerous if you're careful." "Sounds miserable." "That's kind of the point." She glanced at him again, and this time there was a ghost of dark humor in her expression. "Sometimes you need something that makes you feel something, you know? Even if it's just cold." Caleb did know. He knew exactly what she meant, and the recognition must have shown on his face because her expression shifted, became less defensive. "I'm Elena," she said. "Caleb." He took a few steps closer, close enough to talk without shouting but still maintaining respectful distance. "I'm renting the blue house up the beach, the one with the wraparound porch." "The Morrison place. I'm 2 doors down from you, the gray cottage with the hydrangeas that are dying because I keep forgetting to water them." Elena wrapped her arms tighter around herself, but she wasn't shivering. The morning air was already warming. "I've seen you walking every morning for the past week. I didn't mean to—" "It's fine. I walk too, later in the day. Different routes, different times, but same basic idea. Moving because sitting still is worse." She said it matter-of-factly, like she was discussing the weather, but Caleb heard the weight underneath. "How long have you been here?" 3 weeks. We're here for the summer, my daughter and I." "We?" "My daughter Lily. She's 6. My mother-in-law is staying with us." Caleb hesitated, then added, "My wife passed away recently." He watched Elena's face carefully, waiting for the pity, the awkward condolences, the way people's expressions changed when grief entered the conversation. But Elena just nodded, like he'd confirmed something she'd already suspected. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "That's a special kind of hell." "Yeah." Caleb found himself appreciating the lack of platitudes, the absence of everything happens for a reason or she's in a better place now. "It really is." They stood in silence for a moment, two strangers connected by nothing except the shared understanding that sometimes the world breaks you and you just have to keep breathing through it. "I have a daughter too," Elena said finally. "Mia, she's 6, same as yours. Maybe they'll run into each other on the beach." "Maybe." Elena turned fully toward him now, and Caleb could see the fine lines around her eyes, the tension in her jaw, the way she held herself like she was ready to fight or flee at any moment. "I should warn you, I'm not great at the whole friendly neighbor thing. I came here to be alone, to figure some things out, and I'm not really in a place where I want to make friends or socialize or any of that." "That makes 2 of us," Caleb said. "I can barely manage conversations with the people I already know, let alone new ones." Another flicker of something that might have been a smile. "Good. Then we understand each other." "Apparently so." Elena glanced back at the water one more time, then sighed. "I'm not actually going in. I tell myself I will every morning, but I always chicken out. It's like this symbolic thing. If I can just make myself do it, then maybe I can handle all the other hard things I need to do. But I never can." "What are the other hard things?" "Lawyer appointments. Custody paperwork. Explaining to my daughter why her father only wants to see her when it makes him look good." Elena's voice went flat again. "Fun stuff like that." Caleb felt a pull of sympathy, followed immediately by the familiar guilt that came with feeling anything other than grief for Sarah. It had only been 3 weeks. Was he even allowed to care about another person's problems yet? Was there a timeline for these things? "That does sound hard," he said carefully. "Yeah, well, we all have our shit, right?" Elena straightened her shoulders, and Caleb could see her pulling her armor back on, rebuilding whatever wall had briefly cracked. "I should get back. Mia will be waking up soon, and she likes me there when she opens her eyes. Something about needing to make sure I'm real, that I didn't disappear while she was sleeping." The words hit Caleb in the chest. Lily did the exact same thing, reached out in the morning to touch his face, to confirm he was solid and present, and hadn't left her the way her mother had. "Caleb?" Elena was looking at him with concern now. "You okay?" "Sorry, yeah. My daughter does the same thing, the checking." Understanding passed between them, deeper than words. They were both single parents holding together children who'd learned too young that the people you love could vanish. "It's the worst, isn't it?" Elena said softly. "Watching them try to be brave when they should just be allowed to be 6. "The absolute worst." Elena started walking backward, moving toward the path that led up to the houses. "Well, if our paths cross again, we can pretend this conversation never happened and go back to being strangers who ignore each other. Or we can acknowledge it and still ignore each other. Either way works for me." "Same here," Caleb said, and found he meant it. There was something freeing about such low expectations, such honest boundaries. Good luck with your grief, Caleb Turner. Good luck with your custody paperwork, Elena Brooks. She almost smiled then, a real one that reached her eyes for just a second before she turned and headed up the beach. Caleb watched her go, the red bikini bright against the pale sand, and felt something he hadn't felt since Sarah died, a tiny spark of curiosity about another human being. He walked back to the rental house slowly, letting the morning sun warm his face. His mother-in-law Margaret was already up, making coffee in the kitchen. She looked exhausted, the grief written in every line of her face. She'd lost her only child, and Caleb knew his pain didn't erase hers, that they were both drowning in different ways. "Good walk?" she asked, her voice rough with sleep and tears. "Same as always," Caleb said, which was both true and not true at all. Lily came padding out of her bedroom a few minutes later, her blonde hair tangled from sleep, her eyes immediately seeking his face. Caleb crouched down and let her touch his cheek, his nose, his forehead, her small fingers confirming he was real. "Morning, Bug," he whispered. "Morning, Daddy." She wrapped her arms around his neck and squeezed. "Did Mommy visit you in your dreams?" It was a question she asked most mornings now, hoping that death meant Sarah had just moved into their dreams, that they could still see her if they tried hard enough. Caleb had learned not to lie to her about it. "Not last night, sweetheart, but I was thinking about her while I walked on the beach." "Did it make you sad?" "A little, but also happy, remembering good things." Lily considered this seriously, her small face so much like Sarah's, it sometimes hurt to look at her. "I tried to remember her voice last night, but I couldn't hear it right. It sounded wrong in my head." Caleb's heart cracked a little more. "We have videos, remember? We can watch them whenever you want to hear her voice." "Okay." Lily pulled back and looked at him with those two wise eyes. "Can we go to the beach today? The real beach, not just walking?" "Absolutely. After breakfast, we'll spend the whole day there if you want." And they did. Margaret packed a lunch while Caleb gathered towels and sunscreen and the beach umbrella Sarah had bought specifically for this trip. The three of them walked down to the shore together, a broken family trying to pretend they were whole. Lily loved the water despite its temperature, shrieking and laughing as waves chased her up the sand. Caleb stood in the shallows and watched her, grateful for every moment of joy she could still find, terrified that he was failing her, that Sarah would be disappointed in how he was handling everything. "Stop thinking so hard," Margaret said beside him. She'd rolled up her pants and waded in too, standing shoulder to shoulder with him. "I can hear your thoughts from here." "I'm trying." "I know you are. And you're doing better than you think." She was quiet for a moment, watching Lily dance with the waves. "Sarah chose well when she chose you. She knew you'd be enough for Lily, even if you don't believe it yet." Caleb couldn't respond to that without crying, so he just nodded and focused on his daughter's laughter, trying to memorize the sound of it. They were building sandcastles near the umbrella when Lily suddenly stood up and pointed down the beach. "Daddy, there's another little girl!" Caleb looked up and felt his stomach do a small flip. Elena was walking toward them, and beside her was a little girl with the same dark hair, wearing a pink bathing suit and carrying a plastic shovel. "Can I go say hi?" Lily asked, already bouncing on her toes. "Let's wait and see if they come closer," Caleb said. But he needn't have bothered. Elena had spotted them, and after a brief hesitation, she angled their path to intersect. "Fancy meeting you here," Elena said when they were close enough. There was something different about her now, in daylight with her daughter beside her. She seemed more guarded, but also more present, like motherhood required her to show up in ways solitude didn't. "Small beach," Caleb replied. The two girls were already sizing each other up with that peculiar intensity children had. Mia spoke first. "I'm Mia. I'm 6 3/4. That's almost 7. "I'm Lily. I'm 6 1/2 exactly. That's almost 6 3/4. Mia giggled. "You're funny. Do you want to build a sandcastle with me?" Lily looked at Caleb for permission. He glanced at Elena, who gave a tiny shrug that said, "Your call." Margaret made the decision for all of them. "Of course you can, sweetie. We'll be right here." She stood and extended her hand to Elena. "I'm Margaret, Lily's grandmother. Please join us. We have plenty of space and more sandwiches than 3 people could possibly eat." Elena looked like she wanted to refuse, but Mia was already moving toward their umbrella, Lily chattering beside her about the best way to make towers. "I'm Elena, and apparently we're staying whether I plan to or not. Children have a way of making those decisions, Margaret said warmly. Please sit. Tell me about yourself. Are you here for the summer as well? Caleb watched as his mother-in-law worked her gentle magic, drawing Elena into conversation despite her obvious reluctance. Margaret had always been good at that, making people feel comfortable, creating connection where none existed. It was one of the things Sarah had loved most about her mother. The girls played, building an increasingly elaborate castle complex complete with moats and towers. Caleb found himself digging trenches and gathering water at their direction, working alongside Elena, who'd been similarly conscripted. They didn't talk much, but the silence was comfortable, two adults in service to childhood imagination. Higher, Mia demanded, pointing at a tower that was already leaning precariously. It needs to be taller than Lily's. Then Lily's needs to be taller than Mia's, Lily countered, grinning. How about they're both the same height, Elena suggested. Equally tall. Both girls considered this, then nodded seriously, as if they'd just negotiated a peace treaty. Mommy's good at making things fair, Mia said to Lily. She's a lawyer. My mommy was a teacher, Lily replied, and Caleb's breath caught at the past tense, the casual way his daughter had learned to speak about death. She taught little kids how to read. Where is she now? Mia asked innocently. Caleb saw Elena tense, ready to redirect her daughter, but Lily answered before anyone could intervene. She died. Her body stopped working and she went away forever. We were really sad, but Daddy says she would want us to still have fun sometimes, so that's what we're trying to do. The silence that followed was heavy. Mia's eyes were wide, processing. Elena looked stricken. Margaret had tears on her cheeks. But Lily just kept patting sand onto her tower, matter-of-fact in the way only children could be about devastating truths. I'm sorry your mommy died, Mia said finally. That's really sad. Yeah, it is. Lily looked up at Mia seriously. Do you have a mommy and a daddy? Just a mommy. My daddy lives far away and he's not very nice, so we don't see him much. Mommy says we're better just us. We're just me and Daddy now, and Grandma Margaret, but she lives somewhere else usually. She's just staying with us because of the sad. Mia nodded like this made perfect sense. Then she held out her shovel to Lily. Do you want to be best friends? Okay, Lily agreed, taking the shovel. Best friends. And just like that, with the simple clarity of childhood, it was decided. Caleb met Elena's eyes over the girls' heads and saw his own shock reflected there, mixed with something that might have been relief. Their daughters had just chosen each other, which meant they were going to have to figure out how to navigate this, whatever this became. Well, Elena said quietly, I guess we're not strangers anymore. Guess not. They stayed at the beach until early afternoon, the girls inseparable, Margaret and Elena talking about everything and nothing, Caleb mostly quiet but present, watching his daughter laugh and play and be 6 years old instead of a tiny person carrying grief too heavy for her frame. When they finally packed up to leave, Mia asked when they could play again, and Lily looked at Caleb with such hope in her eyes that he couldn't have said no if he'd wanted to. Tomorrow? He offered, looking at Elena. She hesitated, and he could see the war in her expression, the desire to keep her walls up versus the reality of a daughter who'd just found a friend. Tomorrow, she agreed. Same time, same place. The girls hugged goodbye like they'd known each other for years instead of hours. Margaret invited Elena and Mia for dinner sometime soon. Elena accepted with visible reluctance, but she accepted, and that felt like progress. That night, after Lily was asleep and Margaret had gone to bed, Caleb sat on the porch in the darkness and thought about the woman in the red bikini who looked like she was fighting the same battles he was. He thought about two little girls building sandcastles, about the easy way children forgave the world for being broken, about the strange coincidence that had brought them all to this beach at this moment. Sarah would have liked Elena, he thought. She would have appreciated her honesty, her clear boundaries, the way she protected her daughter while trying to heal herself. Sarah had always been drawn to genuine people, people who didn't hide behind social niceties. The guilt came then, sharp and familiar. Was he allowed to think things like that? To imagine his dead wife's opinion on the living? To feel anything approaching interest in another woman when Sarah's body had barely been in the ground a month? But underneath the guilt was something else, something smaller but persistent. A tiny green shoot of possibility. Not romance, not even friendship exactly, but connection. The acknowledgement that he and Lily weren't entirely alone in this, that somewhere in this rented beach town was another broken family trying to piece itself back together. It wasn't much, but it was more than he'd had yesterday. Caleb stayed on the porch until the moon rose over the water, painting the waves silver. Somewhere down the beach, in a gray cottage with dying hydrangeas, Elena was probably awake too, probably wrestling with similar thoughts, probably wondering what she'd just agreed to. Tomorrow, they'd meet again. Their daughters would play. They'd make awkward small talk or comfortable silence. And maybe, day by day, hour by hour, they'd learn that survival didn't have to mean being alone. The beach at dawn belonged to ghosts, but the beach in daylight belonged to the living. And Caleb Turner was still, despite everything, alive. He went inside, checked on Lily one more time, and tried to sleep. Tomorrow would come whether he was ready or not. The same way every day had come since Sarah died, relentless and inevitable. But this time, for the first time, he found himself almost looking forward to it. The next morning, Caleb woke before his alarm, which was unusual. He lay in bed for a moment, trying to identify the feeling in his chest, and realized with some surprise that it was anticipation. Not happiness, exactly. That seemed too strong, too inappropriate. But a quiet curiosity about what the day would bring. Lily was already awake when he went to her room, sitting up in bed with her stuffed rabbit. "Is it beach time yet?" she asked immediately. "After breakfast," Caleb promised. "Can Mia come?" "We're meeting them there, remember?" Lily's face lit up in a way it hadn't in weeks. She scrambled out of bed and ran to her dresser, pulling out her favorite purple bathing suit. "I need to get ready. Mia and I are going to build the biggest castle ever." Caleb helped her get ready, feeling Margaret's approving gaze when they came into the kitchen. His mother-in-law was becoming a specialist in reading unspoken things and understanding the small victories of moving forward. They arrived at the beach to find Elena and Mia already there, setting up their umbrella. Mia saw Lily and started jumping up and down, waving frantically. "They act like it's been weeks instead of one day," Elena said as Caleb approached. She was wearing jean shorts and a t-shirt today, more armor against the world than yesterday's vulnerable red bikini. "Childhood friendship moves fast," Caleb said. "Apparently." The girls ran off immediately, Margaret following to supervise. Caleb and Elena were left standing beside each other, suddenly awkward without the buffer of children or sandcastles. "So," Elena said. "So," Caleb echoed. "This is weird, right? The fact that we're doing this?" "Extremely weird." "Good. Just making sure I wasn't the only one feeling it." Elena sat down in the sand, and after a moment, Caleb joined her. "I meant what I said yesterday about not being good at the friend thing. I don't want you to think I'm going to suddenly become some chatty neighbor who brings you casseroles and wants to have long heart-to-hearts. Good, because I'm not equipped for that either. But Mia seems really happy around Lily, and that's rare. She's had a hard time making friends since we moved here. Lily, too. She's been so closed off since Sarah died. But with Mia, she's just herself." Elena picked up a handful of sand and let it sift through her fingers. "Kids are resilient in ways we're not. They just accept things and move on. I wish I could do that." "What are you trying to accept?" She was quiet for a long moment, and Caleb thought she might not answer, but then she started talking, her voice low and careful. "I was married for 7 years. Derek was charming, successful, good-looking, everything I thought I wanted. But he was also controlling in ways I didn't recognize until it was too late. Small things at first. Opinions on what I wore, who I spent time with, how I managed money. Then bigger things. Tracking my phone, monitoring my emails, making me account for every minute of my day." Caleb felt anger stir in his chest, but he kept quiet, letting her talk. "I left him 2 years ago, took Mia and filed for divorce. He fought it, of course, made my life hell with lawyers and custody battles and threats. But I won. Got primary custody, child support, everything I needed to build a new life." Elena's jaw tightened. "Except he can't let go. He shows up unannounced, tries to insert himself into Mia's life when it's convenient for him, makes promises he doesn't keep. Every time I think we're finally free, He finds a new way to remind me that he still considers us his property. That's not just controlling, Caleb said quietly. That's abusive. Yeah, I know that now. Therapy helped me see it clearly, but knowing it and being free from it are different things. She looked at him directly. So that's my baggage. That's why I'm here alone on this beach, trying to give Mia a summer where she doesn't have to think about her father's dysfunction, and it's why I'm not great at trusting people, especially men. I appreciate you telling me. I figured you should know. In case you were wondering why I'm so prickly. I wasn't thinking prickly. I was thinking careful. There's a difference. Elena smiled slightly. Careful. I like that better. They watched their daughters play, two single parents carrying different kinds of grief, finding themselves in an accidental alliance neither had planned for. Can I ask you something? Elena said after a while. Sure. How do you do it? How do you wake up every day and just keep going when the person you loved is gone? Caleb had been asked versions of this question by other people, but coming from Elena it felt different, more genuine, less performative. Honestly, most days I don't know. I just do the next thing, and then the next thing, and eventually the day is over and I survived it. He paused. But Lily helps. She needs me, so I have to show up. I don't get the luxury of falling apart completely. That's what I tell myself too, about Mia. But some days it feels like I'm faking it so hard that eventually she's going to see through me. She probably already does. Kids are perceptive like that. But I think what matters is that we keep trying, keep showing up even when we want to hide. Elena nodded slowly. My therapist says something similar. She calls it functional brokenness. Like, yes, we're shattered, but we can still function well enough to take care of our kids and pay our bills and not completely lose it. Functional brokenness. I like that. Very accurate. They fell into silence again, but it was easier now, more natural. Caleb found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in weeks, letting go of the constant tension he carried. Daddy, Elena! Lily came running up, Mia right behind her. Can we go in the water, please? We'll be really careful. Margaret appeared behind them, slightly out of breath. I can take them if you'd like. Stay close to shore. Keep them in sight. Caleb looked at Elena, who shrugged. Sounds good to me. The girls cheered and ran toward the water with Margaret trailing behind, calling out warnings about not going too deep. Caleb and Elena remained on the sand, guardians from a distance. Margaret seems wonderful, Elena said. How is she doing? With losing her daughter? Not great, if I'm honest, but she hides it well around Lily. We both do. Caleb drew patterns in the sand with his finger. Sometimes I feel guilty about that, like we're not being honest with Lily about how hard this is. But then I think maybe she needs us to hold it together, at least in front of her. There's probably no right answer. We just do the best we can and hope we're not screwing them up too badly. The parent motto. Elena laughed, and the sound surprised both of them. I haven't done that in a while. Actual laughing. Same here. They spent the rest of the morning like that, talking in fragments between long silences, watching their daughters play, existing in the strange space between strangers and friends. When lunchtime came, Margaret produced the sandwiches she'd packed, and Elena contributed fruit and chips from her bag. They ate together under the umbrella, the girls chattering nonstop about their castle plans and what they'd name the various towers. Castle Lily Mia, Mia announced. No, Castle Mia Lily, Lily countered. How about just the castle? Elena suggested. Both girls wrinkled their noses at such a boring name. The Friendship Castle? Margaret tried. Yes! They agreed in perfect unison, then dissolved into giggles. Caleb felt something shift in his chest watching them, these two little girls who'd found each other in the midst of their separate storms. Maybe that's what healing looked like. Not grand gestures or dramatic transformations, but small moments of joy breaking through the grief. After lunch, the girls wanted to explore the tide pools farther down the beach. Margaret volunteered to take them, and Caleb found himself alone with Elena again. So what did you do? Elena asked. Before, when your wife was alive. I'm a software engineer, was a software engineer. I've been on leave since Sarah got sick, and I'm not sure I'm going back. The company's been understanding, but eventually they'll need to know my plans. Do you want to go back? Caleb considered the question. I don't know. Part of me wants the routine, the distraction, the sense of purpose. But part of me thinks I need something different now, something that lets me be more present for Lily. Sarah and I had always planned that once Lily was in school full-time, I'd look for remote work or maybe start my own consulting business. Guess I'm just doing it sooner than expected. What did Sarah do? You said she was a teacher? First grade. She loved it. Loved the kids, loved seeing them learn to read and discover books. Caleb's voice went soft. She was good at it. Patient, creative, enthusiastic, the kind of teacher kids remembered years later. She sounds amazing. She was. Elena was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, "Can I ask what happened? You don't have to answer if you don't want to." Cancer. Breast cancer initially 5 years ago. She beat it, or we thought she did. But it came back last year, aggressive and everywhere. By the time they caught it, there wasn't much they could do except make her comfortable. Caleb stared at the water, not seeing it. She died 3 weeks and 5 days ago. At home, in hospice, with me and Lily and Margaret there. She held on longer than the doctors thought she would, just to make sure we'd be okay. I'm so sorry, Caleb. Thank you. He meant it. Unlike most condolences, Elena's felt genuine, coming from someone who understood loss, even if hers was different. What about you? What do you do? Family law, ironically enough. I help people navigate divorces, custody battles, all the messy legal stuff that happens when families break apart. Elena's smile was bitter. I got into it because I wanted to help people, and I ended up becoming the thing I was trying to fix. You didn't break apart your family. Your ex did that. I know. Intellectually, I know that, but emotionally? She shook her head. It's harder to accept. I keep thinking about what I missed, what signs I ignored, how I let it get so bad before I left. Abusers are good at hiding what they are. That's not your fault. My therapist says the same thing, weekly. Sometimes I even believe her. Elena pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. Derek's getting worse lately, more aggressive with his demands for custody time, more manipulative with Mia. My lawyer thinks he might be planning something, but we can't figure out what. Does Mia want to see him? No. And that's what kills me. She's 6 years old and she's already figured out that her father only shows up when it benefits him. What kind of man makes his daughter feel like that? Caleb didn't have an answer to that. They sat in heavy silence until the girls came running back, their hands full of shells and sea glass, their faces bright with discovery. Look what we found! Lily thrust a pink shell at Caleb. It's perfect. No cracks or anything. It's beautiful, Bug. We found 11 perfect ones, Mia added, showing Elena her collection. We're going to make a necklace. The afternoon continued in the same pattern. The girls playing, the adults watching, Margaret moving between both groups like a gentle mediator. When the sun started to sink toward the horizon, Elena stood and brushed sand from her shorts. We should go. Mia needs dinner and a bath, and if I don't get her moving now, she'll fight bedtime for hours. Same, Caleb agreed. The girls protested, of course, begging for 5 more minutes that turned into 10, then 15. Finally, Elena and Caleb had to physically separate them, promising that they'd see each other again tomorrow. Will you be here in the morning? Mia asked Lily, her small face serious. I think so. Right, Daddy? Caleb looked at Elena, who gave a small nod. Yeah, Bug. We'll be here. They walked back to their respective houses, the girls chattering between them about their plans for tomorrow's castle construction. When they reached Elena's cottage, Mia hugged Lily goodbye, then surprised everyone by hugging Caleb too. Thank you for letting Lily be my friend, she said seriously. Caleb's throat tightened. Thank you for being Lily's friend. Elena's eyes were suspiciously bright as she took Mia's hand. Come on, sweetie, let's get inside. Bye, Lily. Bye, Caleb. Bye, Grandma Margaret. Bye, Mia. Bye, Elena. They waved until Elena's door closed, then continued to their own rental. Lily was unusually quiet on the short walk, processing something. Daddy? She said as they climbed the porch steps. Do you think Mommy would like Mia? Caleb stopped, crouching down to her level. I think Mommy would love Mia, and I think she'd be really happy that you found such a good friend. Do you think she'd like Elena too? Yeah, sweetheart, I think she would. Lily nodded, satisfied. Good, because I really like them, and I don't want Mommy to be sad that we have new friends. Mommy wanted us to keep living, to keep finding joy. New friends are part of that. Okay. Lily hugged him tight. I miss her, though. I miss her too, Bug. Every single day. They stayed like that for a long moment, father and daughter holding each other against the enormity of their loss. Then Lily pulled back and took his hand. Can we have spaghetti for dinner? It was Mommy's favorite. Absolutely. I'll make it just how she liked it. That night, after Lily was asleep and Margaret had retired to her room, Caleb found himself on the porch again. The lights were on in Elena's cottage, and he could see shadows moving behind the curtains. He wondered if she was having similar conversations with Mia, navigating the complex territory of moving forward while honoring the past. His phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. It's Elena. Margaret gave me your number. Hope that's okay. Just wanted to say today was good. Really good. Thank you for not being weird about everything. Caleb smiled and typed back. Not weird. Got it. Same time tomorrow? Same time. And Caleb, your wife would be proud of how you're handling this. I can tell. He stared at the message for a long time, feeling things he wasn't ready to name. Finally, he responded simply. Thank you. That means more than you know. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, good night. Good night. Caleb sat in the darkness, listening to the ocean, thinking about the strange mathematics of loss and connection. 3 weeks and 5 days ago, his world had ended. But somehow, impossibly, it was also beginning again. Not replacing what he'd lost, but building something new alongside the grief. Tomorrow he'd wake up. He'd check on Lily. He'd make breakfast. And he'd walk down to the beach where a woman in a red bikini had dared the world to judge her, where 2 little girls had decided to be best friends, where maybe, just maybe, healing was possible. The beach at dawn still belonged to ghosts, but the beach in daylight was starting to feel like it belonged to him too, to all of them, these broken people learning to be whole again. Caleb went inside, set his alarm, and tried to sleep. Tomorrow would come. And for the first time since Sarah died, that didn't feel quite so terrifying. The days that followed developed a rhythm that surprised Caleb with its ease. Every morning, he and Lily would walk down to the beach where Elena and Mia were already waiting, and the girls would immediately run off together while the adults settled into their comfortable, careful friendship. Margaret joined them most days, her presence a gentle buffer that made the whole arrangement feel less weighted with significance. By the end of the first week, Caleb had learned things about Elena that she probably didn't share easily. How she took her coffee black because Derek had always insisted on adding cream and sugar for her. How she'd grown up in foster care and put herself through law school. How she sang off-key in the car and didn't care who heard. Small details that built a picture of someone fighting hard to reclaim herself. Elena learned things about him too. That he'd met Sarah in college during a philosophy class, where they'd argued about free will for an entire semester before he'd asked her out. That he'd wanted 3 kids, but Sarah's cancer had made that impossible. That he still slept on his side of the bed, leaving Sarah's side untouched, and he didn't know when he'd be ready to claim that space as his own. That's not weird, Elena had said when he'd admitted it, her voice soft. That's grief. You're allowed to hold on to things. They never planned these conversations. They happened in the spaces between watching the girls play, during long walks down the beach while Margaret supervised sandcastle construction, in the quiet moments when vulnerability felt safer than pretense. It was during the second week that things shifted. Caleb was helping Lily tie her shoes on the porch when he heard raised voices from Elena's cottage. He couldn't make out words, but the tone was unmistakable. Anger, defensiveness, fear. Lily heard it too, her small face creasing with worry. Is Elena okay? She asked. I'm sure she's fine, Bug. Sometimes adults have loud conversations. But 20 minutes later, when they arrived at the beach, Elena was already there with Mia, and Caleb could see the tension radiating from her shoulders. Her jaw was tight, her movements sharp and controlled. Mia was quieter than usual, staying close to her mother. Margaret noticed immediately. Girls, why don't you go start gathering shells for that necklace project? I'll help you in just a minute. Once the children were out of earshot, she turned to Elena with gentle concern. What happened? Elena's laugh was harsh. Derek happened. He called this morning demanding to take Mia for the weekend. Not asking, demanding. Said he's been patient long enough and it's time I stopped poisoning our daughter against him. What did you tell him? Caleb asked. I told him the custody agreement says he gets supervised visitation twice a month, and that hasn't changed. If he wants more time, he can petition the court. Elena's hands were shaking slightly. He didn't like that answer. Started yelling about how I'm a vindictive bitch who's using Mia to punish him, how any judge would side with him if they knew the truth about me. What truth? Margaret's voice was sharp. Whatever truth he decides to invent. That's his specialty, taking reality and twisting it until even I start questioning what actually happened. Elena wrapped her arms around herself. He said he's coming here, to the beach house, to see his daughter and remind her who her real family is. Caleb felt anger surge through him, protective and fierce. When? He didn't say. Could be today, could be next week. He likes keeping me off balance. Elena's voice cracked slightly. I should have known this summer wouldn't last, that he'd find a way to ruin it. He's not ruining anything, Margaret said firmly. You have a custody agreement. If he shows up and harasses you, you call the police. It's not that simple. He's careful, always careful. He never crosses lines in ways that look bad on paper. He's just concerned father trying to see his daughter, and I'm the difficult ex-wife making everything complicated. Elena's eyes were bright with unshed tears. And the worst part is Mia. She's finally starting to relax, to be a normal kid again, and now I have to prepare her for the possibility that her father might show up and turn everything upside down. Caleb wanted to fix this, wanted to promise that Derek wouldn't come, that Mia and Elena would be safe. But he'd learned through Sarah's illness that some things couldn't be fixed with good intentions, that sometimes all you could offer was presence. Then we prepare together, he said. You're not alone in this. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, and something passed between them, understanding maybe, or recognition. You don't have to do that. This isn't your problem. Mia is Lily's best friend. That makes it my problem too. He kept his voice steady, calm. Besides, I'm pretty good at being quietly intimidating when necessary. Software engineers have hidden depths. That got a small, watery laugh from Elena. Quietly intimidating. I'd like to see that. Hopefully you won't have to, but if Derek does show up, you won't face him alone. Margaret nodded her agreement. Absolutely not. We're in this together now. Elena seemed to fold a little, the rigid control slipping. I don't know how to do this, how to accept help. I've been on my own for so long. Then it's time to learn, Margaret said gently. Now come on. Those girls are going to wonder what we're discussing so seriously, and I'd rather they focus on shell necklaces than adult drama. They joined the children, and Caleb watched Elena force brightness into her voice, watched her smile at Mia and exclaim over the shells they'd collected. It was a performance, but it was also love, the willingness to carry fear so her daughter didn't have to. Lily and Mia were oblivious to the undercurrents, focused entirely on their project. They decided the necklaces would be matching friendship necklaces, and they were taking the selection process very seriously. This one's too pointy, Mia declared, holding up a shell. It might poke us. And this one's too big, Lily added. It won't fit on the string. What about these? Caleb held out two small, smooth shells, nearly identical in size and color. Both girls examined them carefully, then nodded in unison. Perfect! As the morning stretched into afternoon, Caleb noticed Elena checking her phone repeatedly, her shoulders tensing each time. He understood. Waiting for disaster was sometimes worse than the disaster itself. Around 2 o'clock, Mia started getting tired and cranky, rubbing her eyes and whining about the sand. Elena stood immediately. We should go. Mia needs a nap. We can walk you back, Caleb offered. You don't have to. I know, but I want to. Margaret took Lily's hand. We'll all walk together, safety in numbers and all that. They packed up their things and headed toward the cottages, the girls running ahead, then circling back, their energy seemingly inexhaustible despite Mia's impending crash. When they reached Elena's house, Caleb saw her entire body go rigid. There was a car in her driveway. a sleek black sedan that screamed money and status. "He's here," Elena whispered. Before Caleb could respond, the front door opened and a man stepped out. Derek was everything Elena had described and worse: tall, handsome in that polished way that came from expensive haircuts and gym memberships, wearing casual clothes that probably cost more than Caleb made in a week. He had the smile of someone who'd never been told no. "There's my girl!" Derek's voice was loud, performative. "Daddy missed you so much!" Mia stopped dead, her small body going very still. She didn't run to him. She didn't smile. She just stood there, and then slowly, deliberately, she moved closer to Elena. Derek's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Mia, honey, aren't you going to give Daddy a hug?" "How did you get in my house?" Elena's voice was ice. "I still have a key, remember? Technically, half that house is mine until the property settlement is finalized." Derek's attention shifted to Caleb and Margaret. "And who are these people? New friends, Elena? You always did collect strays." Caleb felt Margaret's hand on his arm, a gentle warning not to react. But every instinct in him wanted to put himself between Derek and the others, wanted to wipe that smug expression off the man's face. "Derek, you need to leave, now." "The custody agreement says supervised visitation only, and this isn't a scheduled visit." Elena's voice was remarkably steady. "I'm just trying to see my daughter. Is that a crime?" Derek spread his hands in a gesture of innocence. "I drove 6 hours because I missed her, and you're going to turn me away? What kind of mother does that?" "The kind who follows court orders." Elena took Mia's hand. "If you want to see Mia, you go through proper channels. You don't break into my house and ambush us." "Break in? I used a key, and I didn't ambush anyone. I've been waiting patiently inside for hours." Derek's eyes narrowed. "But I can see you've been busy making new friends. Is that what this summer is really about, Elena? Finding yourself a replacement daddy for Mia?" The accusation hung in the air, ugly and deliberate. Caleb saw exactly what Derek was doing, trying to provoke a reaction, trying to make Elena look unstable or unreasonable. It was manipulation dressed up as concern. "Mr. Brooks," Margaret said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent decades managing difficult parents. "You're upsetting the children. I suggest you leave before this situation escalates." Derek's smile turned patronizing. "And you are?" "Someone who recognizes harassment when she sees it." Margaret stepped forward, positioning herself slightly in front of Elena and Mia. "You've made your presence known. Now it's time to go." "I don't think you understand the situation here, ma'am. I'm Mia's father. I have rights." "You have the rights outlined in your custody agreement," Caleb said, keeping his voice calm and level. "What you don't have is the right to trespass or harass. Elena asked you to leave. I suggest you listen." Derek looked at him properly for the first time, sizing him up. Caleb held his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. He'd faced down aggressive venture capitalists and hostile board members in his career. He could handle one abusive ex-husband. "And you are?" Derek's tone was mocking. "A friend, and a witness to this conversation." Caleb pulled out his phone. "Would you like me to call the police, or would you prefer to leave voluntarily?" For a moment, real anger flashed across Derek's face, the mask slipping, but then he smiled again, smooth and practiced. "That won't be necessary. I can see when I'm not wanted." He looked down at Mia, who was still pressed against Elena's leg. "Bye, sweetheart. Daddy will see you soon. Very soon." The threat in those last 2 words was unmistakable. Elena's hand tightened on Mia's shoulder. Derek walked to his car with unhurried confidence, making a show of how unbothered he was. He paused before getting in, looking back at them. "Elena, we're going to have a conversation about this, about who you're exposing our daughter to. My lawyer will be very interested." Then he was gone, the black sedan pulling away smoothly, leaving them standing in the driveway like survivors of a storm. The moment the car disappeared, Elena's legs seemed to give out. She sank down right there on the driveway, pulling Mia into her lap. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry you had to see that." "I don't like Daddy," Mia said, her voice small. "He's scary." "I know, sweetheart. I know." Lily was crying, overwhelmed by the tension she didn't fully understand. Caleb picked her up, letting her bury her face in his shoulder. Margaret was already pulling out her phone. I'm calling your lawyer, she told Elena. That man just violated multiple court orders, and we need it documented immediately. Elena nodded numbly. Caleb crouched down beside her, still holding Lily. Are you okay? No, but I will be. Elena looked up at him, her eyes haunted. Thank you. For being here. For not backing down. Of course. He meant it, about his lawyer. He's going to twist this, make it look like I'm the problem. Her voice was hollow. He'll say I'm exposing Mia to strangers, creating an unstable environment. He'll use you and Lily as evidence that I'm not focused on her. Then we'll testify about what actually happened, about how he trespassed and violated custody orders. You don't understand how he works. He'll make you the villain too, the predatory new man trying to replace Mia's father. It doesn't matter that it's not true. He'll make people believe it. Caleb understood what she was really saying, that being close to him put her at risk, that Derek would weaponize their friendship. The smart thing would be to step back, to create distance before things got more complicated. But he looked at Mia, trembling in Elena's arms, and he looked at Lily, who'd finally found a friend who made her smile again, and he knew he couldn't do that. Let him try, Caleb said quietly. I'm not going anywhere. Elena's eyes filled with tears. You don't know what you're signing up for. Maybe not, but I know I'm not letting that man intimidate us into isolation. That's what he wants. For you to be alone, vulnerable, easy to control. Caleb shifted Lily to his other arm. We're stronger together. All of us. Margaret finished her phone call and came back over. Elena, your lawyer wants you to come in tomorrow morning. She's filing an emergency motion about the custody violation and the trespassing. She said to document everything. Write down exactly what happened, what was said, who was present. The more detail, the better. Okay. Elena stood slowly, still holding Mia. I should get her inside. She needs to decompress from all this. We'll be right next door if you need anything, Caleb said. Anything at all. Thank you. Elena's voice broke on the words. Thank you both. They waited until Elena and Mia were safely inside before walking to their own cottage. Lily was quiet, processing, and Caleb knew there would be questions later that he'd have to answer carefully. Inside, Margaret made tea while Caleb settled Lily on the couch with her favorite stuffed rabbit. She looked up at him with serious eyes. Was that Mia's daddy? Yes, sweetheart. He was mean. He wasn't being very nice, no. Is he going to take Mia away? The fear in her voice was visceral. No, Bug. Elena won't let that happen, and we're going to help make sure Mia stays safe. Like you kept me safe when Mommy was sick? The question gutted him. Yeah, sweetheart. Like that. Lily seemed satisfied with this answer. She curled up against him, and Caleb held her, thinking about all the ways adults failed children, all the ways Derek was failing Mia by making her afraid instead of making her feel loved. Margaret brought him tea and sat in the chair across from them. That man is dangerous. I know. I meant what I said about testifying. If this goes to court, if Elena needs character witnesses, I'll be there. Me too. Caleb paused. He's going to come after me, isn't he? Make me into some kind of threat? Almost certainly. Men like Derek don't like competition, even when there isn't any. Margaret's expression was shrewd. Is there? Competition, I mean? Caleb met her eyes. I don't know. I'm not looking for it. But, Elena, he trailed off, not sure how to finish. Is important to you, Margaret finished gently. And that's okay, Caleb. Sarah would want you to keep living, to keep connecting with people. It's only been a month. There's no timeline for these things. You're allowed to care about someone new without it diminishing what you felt for Sarah. Margaret sipped her tea. Besides, I don't think what you and Elena have is romantic. Not yet, anyway. It's two people recognizing similar wounds and finding comfort in not being alone. That's probably the most accurate description I've heard. They sat in comfortable silence until Lily dozed off against Caleb's chest. He carried her to her room and tucked her in, then returned to find Margaret staring out the window toward Elena's cottage. I'm worried, she said quietly. That man has the look of someone who doesn't lose gracefully. What do you think he'll do? Whatever he has to in order to maintain control. Elena was right to be scared. Margaret turned to face him. You need to be careful, Caleb. Getting involved in a custody dispute can get messy, especially for someone in your position. What position is that? A widower with a young daughter. Derek could paint you as unstable, grieving, looking for a replacement family. He could suggest you're using Lily to ingratiate yourself with Elena and Mia. The thought made Caleb sick. That's insane. That's family court. Truth matters less than narrative sometimes. Margaret's expression was sad. I'm not saying don't help Elena. I'm saying be smart about it. Document everything. Be aware of how things might look. Caleb knew she was right, but the advice felt like retreating, like letting Derek win through intimidation. I can't abandon them. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to protect yourself and Lily while you help them. Margaret came over and squeezed his shoulder. You're a good man, Caleb. Sarah knew that. I know that. Just make sure the court knows it too. That evening, Caleb's phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Mia's finally asleep. I keep checking to make sure Derek didn't do something to the house while he was here. Is that paranoid? Not paranoid, cautious. Do you want me to come check with you? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Yes, please. Caleb told Margaret where he was going, then walked the short distance to Elena's cottage. She opened the door before he could knock, looking exhausted. Thank you for coming. I feel ridiculous asking, but I can't shake the feeling that he tampered with something. Then let's check. Where do you want to start? They went through the house methodically, testing locks, checking windows, looking for anything disturbed or out of place. In Mia's room, Elena paused at the dresser. He moved things. Her stuffed animals, they're in the wrong order, and her jewelry box, the one with her baby bracelet. It's open. It's never open. Elena's voice shook. He went through her things like he was marking territory or reminding me he can access anything he wants. Caleb felt anger burn through him again. Did he take anything? I don't think so. Just touched everything. Made sure I'd know he was here. Elena sank down on Mia's bed. God, I hate him. I hate that he still has this power over me, that he can walk into my space and make me feel violated. That's not power. That's trespassing and harassment. Your lawyer will have a field day with this. Maybe. Or maybe the judge will say he was just a father trying to connect with his daughter's belongings. Derek's good at making himself look sympathetic. Elena looked up at Caleb. I meant what I said earlier. He's going to target you now. He'll investigate you, find any vulnerability he can exploit. Let him. I've got nothing to hide. Everyone has something to hide, some truth that looks bad in the wrong context. She stood and started straightening Mia's stuffed animals, putting them back in their proper order. He'll find out about Sarah, about how recently she died. He'll suggest you're emotionally unstable, latching onto us as a replacement family. Is that what you think I'm doing? No. Elena turned to face him. But it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what a judge thinks. Caleb moved closer, keeping his voice gentle. Elena, if being around me puts your custody at risk, I'll back off. I'll stay away. Lily will understand eventually. Would she? Would she understand why her best friend suddenly can't play with her anymore? Elena's eyes were bright. And honestly, Caleb, I don't want you to back off. Mia needs Lily, and She stopped, seeming to catch herself. What do you need? I need to not feel so alone in this. I need to know there are good men in the world, not just Derek. Her voice cracked. I need to believe I can trust someone again. The vulnerability in her admission hit Caleb hard. He understood it completely. The desperate need to have faith in humanity after someone had tried to destroy it. You can trust me, he said quietly. I promise you that. Elena studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. I know, that's what scares me. I actually believe you. They finished checking the house, finding nothing else disturbed. At the door, Elena stopped him. Caleb? What you did today, standing up to Derek, no one's ever done that for me before. He's used to intimidating people, used to everyone backing down. But you didn't. He's a bully. Bullies are only scary until someone calls their bluff. He's more than a bully. He's calculated, patient, willing to play the long game. This isn't over. It's just starting. Then we'll face it together. You, me, Margaret, and our whole army of lawyers. Caleb managed a small smile. plus two very determined 6-year-olds who've decided they're best friends. That's a powerful alliance. That got a genuine laugh from Elena. When you put it that way, Derek doesn't stand a chance. Caleb walked back to his cottage, feeling the weight of what he'd committed to, understanding that he'd just inserted himself into a battle he hadn't chosen. But he'd also seen the look in Mia's eyes when Derek appeared, the fear and resignation of a child who'd learned to expect disappointment from the person who was supposed to protect her. He thought about Lily, about how different her relationship with him was, built on trust and presence and showing up every single day. That's what fathers were supposed to do. Not terrorize, not control, not use love as a weapon. Back inside, Margaret was waiting up. Everything okay? Derek went through the house while they were gone, didn't take anything, just made his presence known. Elena's rattled. I imagine so. Margaret set down her book. You're really doing this? Getting involved in all of this? I'm already involved. The question is whether I'm going to pretend I'm not. And Sarah? Have you thought about how this looks, moving on so quickly? The question stung, but Caleb knew Margaret wasn't trying to hurt him. She was protecting her daughter's memory, and he couldn't fault her for that. I'm not moving on. I don't know if I'll ever move on. How do you move on from losing the person you plan to spend your life with? Caleb sat down heavily. But I also can't stop living, and right now helping Elena and Mia feels like the right thing to do. Sarah would understand that. Margaret was quiet for a moment, then nodded. You're right. She would. Sarah always had a strong sense of justice. It hated seeing people victimized. She smiled sadly. I just miss her so much. And watching you connect with someone else, even just as friends, it makes her absence more real somehow. I know, I feel it too. Caleb reached over and took her hand. But I also think she'd be proud of us. That we're not letting grief make us cruel or isolated. That we're still capable of caring about other people. When did you become so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just trying to survive each day and do right by Lily. Everything else is just improvisation. They sat together in the quiet of the house, two people bound by love for the woman they'd lost, trying to figure out how to honor her memory while still moving forward. The next morning, Caleb woke to find a text from Elena sent at 3 a.m. Can't sleep. Keep seeing Derek's face. Keep hearing his threats. How do you turn your brain off? He responded immediately, even though it was now 6:30. You don't. You just get through it. Want company for breakfast? Please. 20 minutes later, Elena appeared at his door with Mia, both of them looking exhausted. Lily immediately took Mia's hand and led her to the living room where they'd left a half-finished puzzle. Margaret started making pancakes while Caleb poured coffee for himself and Elena. They sat at the kitchen table, and Caleb could see the toll the night had taken, dark circles under Elena's eyes, her hands trembling slightly around her mug. I have my lawyer meeting at 10, she said quietly. My mom's driving up to watch Mia. I didn't want to bring her to a law office, not with everything she witnessed yesterday. That's smart. Derek texted me at midnight, apologizing, saying he didn't mean to upset everyone, that he just missed his daughter and got emotional. Elena's laugh was bitter. Documenting his version of events, making himself look reasonable? My lawyer says it's classic abuser behavior. Escalate, then apologize. Create a record of trying while making me look like the unreasonable one. Will it work? Depends on the judge. Derek's charming, successful, knows how to work a room. I have the truth on my side, but truth doesn't always win in family court. She stared into her coffee. I'm terrified, Caleb. Terrified he's going to find a way to take Mia from me. He won't. You're a good mother. Anyone can see that. You don't understand how he operates. He doesn't need to prove I'm a bad mother. He just needs to prove he's a good father. And he's very good at performing fatherhood when there's an audience. Caleb thought about Derek's display yesterday. The loud greeting, the wounded act when Mia didn't respond. Elena was right. It had all been performance, calculated to make him look like the victim. What can I do to help? Just keep being you. Keep being the kind of man who shows up, who doesn't make promises he can't keep, who treats children like they matter. Elena met his eyes. Mia's never had that from a man. Her grandfather died before she was born, and Derek was only ever interested in her as an extension of himself. But you're teaching her that men can be trustworthy, kind, safe. That matters more than you know. The weight of that responsibility settled on Caleb's shoulders, familiar in its way. Lily depended on him for the same things, to model what a good man looked like, to show her she deserved respect and kindness, to prove that not all men would leave her. "I'm happy to be that for her," he said quietly. "For both of them." Margaret served pancakes, and they ate in comfortable silence, watching the girls piece together their puzzle. Mia's grandmother arrived at 9:30, a sturdy woman with kind eyes who hugged Elena tight and promised everything would be okay. After Elena left for her lawyer appointment, Caleb took both girls to the beach with Margaret. They built castles and collected shells and shrieked at the cold water, and Caleb tried not to think about custody battles and abusive ex-husbands and the fragile nature of newly built connections. Elena texted around noon. "Lawyer says we have a strong case for harassment and violation of custody agreement. Filing emergency motion. Thanks for the written statement you sent. Anytime. How are you holding up?" "Better. Feeling like I'm actually doing something instead of just being a victim." "You were never a victim. You're a fighter." 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before her response came through. "Thank you for seeing that." The emergency hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. In the meantime, Derek went silent. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. Elena said it was strategic, that he was letting her anxiety build while he prepared his counterattack. But the silence gave them time to breathe, to fall back into their beach routine with slightly more caution. Caleb found himself hyper-aware of how their friendship might look to outsiders, careful about physical proximity, conscious of maintaining appropriate boundaries. But it was exhausting, second-guessing every interaction. On the second evening, he found Elena sitting alone on her porch after Mia had gone to bed. He'd walked over without really deciding to, drawn by the sight of her solitary figure. "Can't sleep either?" she asked as he climbed the steps. "Lily had a nightmare. Took a while to settle her." He sat in the chair beside hers. "You?" "My brain won't shut off. I keep running through worst-case scenarios, preparing for questions Derek's lawyer might ask, trying to anticipate his next move." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." Elena pulled her knees up to her chest. "Can I ask you something? And will you answer honestly?" "Of course." "Do you regret getting involved in this? Because you didn't sign up for custody battles and restraining orders and all this drama. You came here to grieve and heal, not to deal with my mess." Caleb considered the question carefully. Did he regret it? The stress, the complications, the way Derek's shadow now hung over everything? "No," he said finally. "I don't regret it. This summer was supposed to be about Lily learning to live again, finding joy after loss. And she has. Because of Mia. Because of you. That matters more than any inconvenience Derek causes. Even if it ends up in court, even if you have to testify, have lawyers ask you invasive questions about your life and your marriage and your grief, even then." Elena was quiet for a long moment. "I don't deserve this. Your loyalty, your support, we barely know each other. Time doesn't determine worth. I know the important things, that you love your daughter fiercely, that you're brave even when you're terrified, that you show up every day even when it's hard. That's enough." She turned to look at him, and in the dim porch light, he could see tears on her cheeks. "Why are you so kind?" "Sarah always said kindness was a choice we make every day. That it's easy to be kind when things are good, but the real test is choosing it when life is hard." Caleb's throat tightened. "She was kind even when she was dying, even when she had every reason to be angry and bitter. I'm trying to honor that." "She must have been incredible." "She was. And she would have liked you, your strength, your honesty, the way you refused to let Derek diminish you." Elena wiped her eyes. "I wish I could have met her, compared notes on surviving impossible things. She would have said the same thing I'm saying now. You're stronger than you think, and you're not alone in this." They sat together in the darkness, two people learning that connection didn't always follow a timeline, that sometimes the most important relationships formed in crisis rather than comfort. The hearing would come, Derek would make his moves, the battle would continue. But tonight, in this moment, they had each other. And maybe that was enough. The morning of the emergency custody hearing arrived with overcast skies that matched Caleb's mood perfectly. He'd barely slept, running through every possible scenario, every way Derek's lawyers might twist the truth into something ugly. Elena had texted him at 4 a.m., a single message that said she couldn't breathe, and he'd called her immediately, staying on the phone until the sun came up, just listening to her try to steady herself. Now standing outside the courthouse in his best suit, watching Elena emerge from her car looking pale but determined, Caleb felt the weight of what they were about to face. This wasn't just about Derek's violation of the custody agreement or his trespassing. This was about whether the court would see through his performance to the manipulation underneath, whether justice would actually prevail or whether Derek's money and charm would win the day. "You look like you're about to face a firing squad," Margaret said beside him, adjusting his tie. She'd insisted on coming, said she wouldn't miss being there for Elena after everything the woman had been through. "That's about how it feels." "Then it's a good thing you've got armor." Margaret patted his chest. "The truth. That's all you need." Elena reached them, her lawyer, Ms. Patricia Donovan, close behind. Patricia was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who specialized in high-conflict custody cases, and she'd made it clear from their first meeting that she didn't tolerate manipulative ex-husbands. "How are we feeling?" Patricia asked Elena, though her assessing gaze swept over all of them. "Terrified, angry, ready to fight." Elena's voice was steadier than Caleb expected. "Let's just get this over with." They filed into the courtroom, and Caleb felt his stomach clench when he saw Derek already seated with his own lawyer, a polished man named Richard Chen, who had a reputation for winning custody cases through aggressive tactics. Derek looked calm, confident, dressed in an expensive suit that screamed successful businessman and concerned father. He didn't even glance at Elena, playing the role of the wounded party with practiced ease. The judge, a stern-faced woman named Judge Rebecca Martinez, called the hearing to order. Patricia stood immediately, her voice clear and professional as she outlined the emergency motion. Derek's violation of the custody agreement by appearing at Elena's residence unannounced, his trespassing into her home using an old key, his deliberate intimidation in front of their daughter. "Your Honor, this is part of an established pattern of harassment and control that we've documented extensively. Mr. Brooks has repeatedly shown that he values his own desires over his daughter's emotional welfare, and we're asking the court to enforce the existing custody order with consequences for his violations." Richard Chen stood, his expression sympathetic and reasonable. "Your Honor, if I may, Mr. Brooks is simply a father who misses his daughter and made an error in judgment. He still had a key to the property because the divorce settlement hasn't been finalized, and he went to the house hoping to see his child. When he realized Ms. Brooks wasn't home, he waited inside rather than on the street where he might have alarmed neighbors. His intentions were entirely benign." "Benign?" Patricia's voice cut like a knife. "He went through his daughter's belongings while they were out, rearranging her room, making it clear he'd invaded their space. Then he ambushed them when they returned, ignoring the custody agreement that specifically states all visits must be scheduled and supervised." Judge Martinez held up a hand. "I've read the filings from both sides. Mr. Chen, your client violated the custody agreement. That's not in dispute. The question is whether this violation warrants modification of the existing order. Your Honor, Mr. Brooks has been nothing but cooperative with the custody arrangement. This single incident was an aberration, driven by his deep love for his daughter and his frustration at being kept from her." "Kept from her?" Elena's voice rang out before Patricia could stop her. "He has supervised visitation twice a month as ordered by this court. He's the one who's missed 3 of the last 5 scheduled visits because they weren't convenient for his work schedule." Judge Martinez fixed Elena with a stern look. "Ms. Brooks, you'll have your chance to speak. Please wait to be called." Elena sat back down, her hands shaking. Caleb wanted to reach over and take her hand, but they were in different sections of the courtroom, separated by procedure and protocol. The hearing proceeded with excruciating slowness. Richard Chen called Derek to the stand first, and Caleb watched with growing anger as Derek performed his role perfectly. He spoke about how much he missed Mia, how the divorce had devastated him, how he'd made a mistake in going to the house, but only because he was desperate to see his daughter. He even managed to get tears in his eyes when he talked about how Mia used to run to him when he came home from work, how that simple joy had been stolen from him by the custody arrangement. It was a masterful performance, and Caleb could see some of the court staff looking sympathetic. This was Derek's gift, the ability to seem genuine even when lying, to make his manipulation look like love. Patricia cross-examined him ruthlessly, walking him through each violation of the custody agreement, each missed visit, each instance where he'd put his own schedule ahead of his daughter's needs. She brought up the restraining order violations, the pattern of controlling behavior during the marriage, the therapist's reports about Mia's anxiety around her father. Mr. Brooks, isn't it true that your daughter didn't run to you when she saw you at Ms. Brooks's residence? That, in fact, she moved away from you toward her mother? Derek's mask slipped for just a second, a flash of anger in his eyes. She's been poisoned against me. Elena has spent 2 years turning my daughter against me, making her afraid of her own father. Or perhaps your daughter has learned through experience that you're not safe, that you value control over her well-being. Patricia's voice was cool. No further questions, Your Honor. Elena was called to the stand next, and Caleb held his breath as she took her seat. She looked small and vulnerable up there, but when she started speaking, her voice was strong. Patricia led her through the events of that day, coming home from the beach to find Derek's car in the driveway, the terror of knowing he'd been inside their home, the way Mia had immediately moved to her for protection instead of greeting her father. Elena described finding her daughter's belongings disturbed, the jewelry box open, the clear message that Derek could access anything he wanted. How did this incident affect your daughter? Patricia asked. She couldn't sleep that night. She kept asking me if he was going to come back, if we were safe. She wanted to sleep in my bed because she was afraid he'd come into her room while she was sleeping. Elena's voice cracked. It took weeks after we left him for her to feel safe in her own bedroom, and he destroyed that in one afternoon. Richard Chen's cross-examination was aggressive, suggesting that Elena was exaggerating Mia's reaction, that she was using their daughter as a weapon against Derek, that her own anxiety was creating fear in the child, rather than Derek's actions. Isn't it true, Ms. Brooks, that you've been romantically involved with a man you've known for less than a month? A recent widower who's staying in close proximity to you and your daughter? The courtroom went silent. Caleb felt his blood run cold. This was it. Derek's real strategy. Not to defend his own actions, but to attack Elena's judgment. Elena lifted her chin. I have a friend who's also staying at the beach for the summer. Our daughters are friends. There's nothing inappropriate about that friendship. A friend you spend nearly every day with? Who your daughter has become attached to. Isn't it true that this man was present when Mr. Brooks came to see his daughter, and that he physically intimidated Mr. Brooks? He stood beside us when Derek showed up uninvited and in violation of a court order. That's not intimidation, that's support. Support from a man who lost his wife mere weeks ago? Don't you think it's concerning that you're exposing your daughter to someone who's clearly unstable and grieving? Patricia was on her feet immediately. Objection. Counsel is making unfounded accusations about a third party who isn't on trial here. Your Honor, we're merely establishing that Ms. Brooks may not be making the best decisions regarding who she allows around her daughter, Richard said smoothly. Judge Martinez considered this. I'll allow some latitude, but Mr. Chen, get to your point quickly. Miss Brooks, isn't it true that you're using this new relationship to replace your daughter's father? That you're so focused on your own needs that you're neglecting Mia's need for a stable relationship with both parents? Elena's hands clenched on the witness stand. That's completely false. I have never prevented Mia from having a relationship with her father. I followed every custody order to the letter. And my friendship with Caleb Turner has nothing to do with Derek's violations of those orders. But it does speak to your judgment, doesn't it? Moving on so quickly, bringing a grieving stranger into your daughter's life. Mr. Turner is not a stranger. He's a kind, stable, honest man who has shown my daughter what healthy behavior looks like, something she's never gotten from her father. Elena's voice rose. And yes, we're friends. Yes, our daughters are close. But that doesn't excuse Derek breaking into my home, violating custody orders, and terrorizing his own child. Judge Martinez called for a brief recess, and Elena practically ran from the witness stand. Caleb met her in the hallway, where she collapsed against the wall. They're going to use you against me. They're going to say I'm unfit because I'm friends with a widower, because I'm not isolating myself the way Derek wants. They can try. But the facts are on your side. Caleb kept his voice calm, even though fury was burning in his chest. You've done nothing wrong. We've done nothing wrong. Patricia joined them, her expression grim. Chen's strategy is clear. He can't defend Derek's actions, so he's attacking Elena's character instead. It's dirty, but sometimes effective. What do we do? Elena asked. We stick to the truth. We show that Derek's the one making poor decisions, not you. And we make sure the judge understands that this is about his violations, not your personal life. Patricia checked her watch. I'm calling Caleb next. Are you ready? Caleb nodded, though his stomach was churning. He'd never testified in court before, never had his words and actions examined under oath. But he'd do it for Elena, for Mia, for the principle that Derek shouldn't be allowed to terrorize his own family. When they reconvened, Caleb took the stand and swore to tell the truth. Patricia's questions were straightforward. How he'd met Elena, the nature of their friendship, what he'd witnessed the day Derek appeared at the house. Mr. Turner, can you describe Mr. Brooks' demeanor when you encountered him? He was aggressive and manipulative. He acted concerned on the surface, but underneath there was clear intimidation. He was trying to make Elena and Mia feel unsafe in their own home. How did Mia react to seeing her father? She was afraid. She didn't go to him, didn't greet him, just pressed herself against her mother. When he spoke to her, she literally hid behind Elena's leg. And what did you do? I stood beside them. I made it clear that Elena wasn't alone, that Derek couldn't intimidate her without someone witnessing it. Richard Chen's cross-examination was exactly what Caleb expected, probing questions about his relationship with Elena, suggestions that he was overstepping boundaries, implications that his grief made him unstable, and his judgment questionable. Mr. Turner, you lost your wife very recently, didn't you? Yes, 3 weeks before I met Elena. And yet here you are, inserting yourself into another woman's life, her child's life, her custody battle. Don't you think that's rather fast? Caleb met Chen's eyes steadily. I think grief doesn't follow a timeline. And I think when you see someone being harassed and intimidated, you have a choice to stand by and watch or to offer support. I chose support. Support or replacement? Aren't you looking for a ready-made family to ease your own loss? The accusation stung because Caleb had asked himself the same question 100 times, but he knew the answer now, knew it with certainty. No, Elena and Mia aren't replacements for what I lost. They're people I care about who deserve to be safe and respected. My grief doesn't negate my ability to recognize right from wrong, and Derek Brooks was wrong to violate that custody order. How convenient that you, Mr. Chen, Judge Martinez's voice cut through the cross-examination. I think we've established Mr. Turner's relationship to the parties. Do you have questions relevant to the actual custody violation? Chen smiled thinly. No further questions, Your Honor. Margaret was called next, and her testimony was devastating in its simplicity. She described what she'd witnessed, the fear in Mia's eyes, the way Derek had tried to manipulate the situation to look like concerned father rather than controlling ex-husband. She spoke about Elena's parenting, about how devoted she was to Mia, about how the friendship with Caleb and Lily had actually helped both families heal from their respective traumas. In my 50 years on this earth, I've seen a lot of people, Margaret said firmly. And I can tell you without hesitation that Derek Brooks is interested in control, not parenting. His daughter is afraid of him, and he did nothing to ease that fear when he saw her. He made demands, performed concern, and tried to intimidate everyone present. That's not a man who deserves unsupervised time with a 6-year-old child. The final testimony came from Mia's therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, who appeared via video call. She spoke about Mia's progress in therapy, about how the child had finally started to feel safe after leaving Derek's house, about the regression she'd experienced after Derek's unannounced appearance. Mia has been very clear in our sessions that she's afraid of her father, not because her mother has coached her, but because her own experiences have taught her that he's unpredictable and controlling. The custody order's requirement for supervised visitation is entirely appropriate, given his behavior patterns. When all testimony was complete, both lawyers made their closing arguments. Richard Chen painted Derek as a loving father being kept from his daughter by a vindictive ex-wife who was already moving on with a new relationship. Patricia Donovan systematically dismantled that narrative, pointing to Derek's pattern of violations, his lack of concern for Mia's emotional state, his continued efforts to control and intimidate Elena. Judge Martinez took only 20 minutes to deliberate. When she returned, her expression was stern. I've reviewed the evidence and heard testimony from all parties. Mr. Brooks, you violated the custody agreement in multiple ways. You used an old key to enter your ex-wife's residence without permission, which constitutes trespassing. You waited inside her home, going through your daughter's belongings, creating an environment of fear and violation. Then when confronted, you attempted to manipulate the situation rather than acknowledge your wrongdoing. Derek's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Furthermore, the court notes that this is part of a pattern. You've missed scheduled visitations when they were inconvenient for you, violated previous restraining orders, and shown more interest in controlling Miss Brooks than in actually building a healthy relationship with your daughter. Your own child was afraid when she saw you, Mr. Brooks. That should give you pause. Judge Martinez turned to Elena. Mrs. Brooks, while I understand Mr. Chen's concerns about your new friendship, I see no evidence that it's detrimental to your daughter. In fact, the testimony suggests that having a stable, positive male figure around has been beneficial for Mia. The court is not in the business of dictating who you can be friends with, as long as those friendships don't endanger your child. Elena's shoulders sagged with relief. Therefore, the court's ruling is as follows. The existing custody agreement stands with modifications. Mr. Brooks will continue supervised visitation twice monthly, but only at a neutral location with a court-appointed supervisor. He is prohibited from going to Ms. Brooks' residence for any reason. He will surrender all keys to her property immediately. And if he violates this order in any way, his visitation rights will be suspended, pending a full custody evaluation. The gavel came down, and it was over. Derek's face was a mask of fury, but he controlled himself, standing and walking out with his lawyer without a word. Caleb watched him go and felt a grim satisfaction. It wasn't everything, but it was justice. Elena was crying, Patricia hugging her, Margaret patting her back. Caleb stayed back, giving them space. But Elena looked up and met his eyes across the courtroom. The gratitude and relief in her expression made his chest tight. Outside the courthouse, in the bright afternoon sun that had broken through the earlier clouds, Elena finally let herself fall apart. She sobbed into Patricia's shoulder, releasing weeks of accumulated fear and stress. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red but clear. Thank you, all of you. I couldn't have done this alone. You didn't have to do it alone, Patricia said firmly. That's the whole point. And Ms. Brooks, you did beautifully in there. You told the truth, and the truth won. For now, Derek won't accept this. He'll find another way to attack. Let him try. We'll be ready. Patricia gathered her briefcase. For now, go home. Hug your daughter. Celebrate this victory. You earned it. They drove back to the beach in separate cars, but Caleb could see Elena's hands shaking on her steering wheel ahead of him. When they reached the cottages, Mia ran out with Elena's mother, and Elena scooped her up, holding her tight. We won, baby. You're safe. The judge said Daddy has to follow the rules now. Mia pulled back to look at her mother's face. So he can't come to our house anymore? Never. Not unless I say he can. Good. I didn't like him being in my room. It made everything feel yucky. Elena carried Mia inside, and Caleb started to head to his own cottage, giving them privacy. But Elena called out to him, Caleb, will you stay? I think I need to not be alone right now. He turned back, seeing the vulnerability in her face, the way she was barely holding it together. Of course. That evening turned into an impromptu celebration. Elena's mother made dinner while Margaret entertained the girls. Caleb helped Elena decompress, listening as she processed the hearing, the testimony, the ruling. She swung between relief and residual fear, certain Derek would retaliate somehow, uncertain how to accept that she'd actually won. You stood up to him, Caleb said when she voiced her fears for the third time. In front of a judge, in front of witnesses, you told the truth about what he is. That took incredible courage. I was terrified the whole time. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing it anyway. He smiled at her. You were fierce up there. I had help. You, Margaret, Patricia. I couldn't have done it alone. But you did do it. We just stood beside you while you fought. Elena was quiet for a long moment, then reached over and took his hand. It was the first time she'd initiated physical contact, and Caleb felt the weight of the gesture. Thank you for not running when things got ugly. Most people would have. I'm not most people. No, you're really not. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, while the sounds of dinner preparation and children's laughter filled the house. It felt domestic and right, in a way that should have scared Caleb, but didn't. This was what healing looked like, he realized. Not dramatic transformations, but quiet moments of connection, small victories against fear, the slow rebuilding of trust and safety. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the girls were asleep, Caleb found himself on his porch again. But this time Elena joined him without being invited, appearing with 2 beers and a tired smile. Couldn't sleep? Too wired. My brain won't shut off. She handed him a beer and sat in the chair beside his. I keep replaying the hearing, thinking of things I should have said differently. You said everything perfectly. Derek's not going to let this go. You know that, right? He'll appeal. He'll file new motions. He'll find ways to make my life difficult. Probably. But you'll handle it. You just proved you can. Elena took a long drink of her beer. I'm scared of what comes next. Of Derek's retaliation, of raising Mia alone, of trusting this. She gestured between them. Whatever this is we're building, then we'll be scared together. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. We show up, we tell the truth, we support each other. Everything else is just details. Elena laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. When did you become so wise? Around the same time I learned that life doesn't have to follow a script, that sometimes the best things come from the worst moments. Caleb turned to look at her. 3 months ago, I was drowning in grief, certain I'd never feel anything but pain again. And now I'm sitting here with you, feeling hopeful about the future. That's not wisdom, that's just being open to possibility. I'm trying to be open, but Derek trained me to expect the worst, to always be waiting for the other shoe to drop. I know, and that's going to take time to unlearn. But Elena, you don't have to unlearn it alone. She met his eyes, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition of what was slowly building beneath their careful friendship. Neither of them was ready to name it yet, but it was there, growing stronger every day. I'm glad I met you, Elena said softly. Even with all the complications, even knowing Derek will use you against me, I'm still glad. I'm glad I met you too. You and Mia both. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking their beers, watching the stars emerge over the ocean. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fears, new battles to fight. But tonight, they'd won something important. Not just a court ruling, but proof that standing up to bullies could work, that telling the truth mattered, that they were stronger together than separate. Inside their respective cottages, Lily and Mia slept peacefully, 2 little girls who'd found friendship in the midst of their family's storms. They were the reason for all of it. The court battles, the careful boundaries, the determination to build something healthy and safe. They deserved parents who fought for their well-being, who modeled strength and honesty, who showed them that love didn't have to hurt. As the night deepened and the temperature dropped, Caleb finally stood to go inside. Elena stood too, and for a moment they just looked at each other, the space between them charged with unspoken things. Good night, Caleb. Good night, Elena. He watched her walk back to her cottage, waited until she was safely inside before going into his own. Margaret was still up, reading in the living room. That went better than I expected, she said without looking up from her book. The hearing or the evening? Both. Margaret marked her page and set the book aside. Elena's good for you, you know. Sarah would have liked her. The words hit Caleb hard, bringing tears to his eyes. You think so? I know so. Sarah always admired strong women, and Elena's as strong as they come. Just took her a while to remember it. Margaret stood and kissed his forehead like she used to do when he and Sarah were first dating. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's a new day. Caleb checked on Lily before bed, finding her sprawled across her mattress with her stuffed rabbit clutched tight. She looked peaceful, unmarked by the adult drama swirling around her, and he was grateful for that. Let her stay innocent a little longer. Let her know only the good parts of their expanding family. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the hearing, about Derek's barely controlled fury, about the way Elena had stood up and told her truth despite her fear. He thought about Margaret's words, about whether Sarah would approve of what was developing between him and Elena. The answer came quietly, gently, like Sarah's voice in his memory. Of course she would approve. She'd loved him enough to want him happy, even if that happiness came from someone else. She'd been generous in life, and death hadn't changed that. Caleb closed his eyes and whispered into the darkness. "Thank you for letting me go. I'll love you forever, but I think I'm ready to love again too. I hope that's okay." There was no answer, but he felt a loosening in his chest, like a fist had finally unclenched. Permission granted, or maybe just permission claimed. Either way, it was progress. He fell asleep thinking about Elena's smile, about Mia's laughter, about the slow, careful way they were all learning to be whole again. The days after Derek's courtroom humiliation were deceptively quiet, like the stillness before a hurricane makes landfall. Elena should have been celebrating. She had a restraining order, her custody protection, the judge's clear statement that Derek's behavior was unacceptable. But instead, she found herself unable to sleep, jumping at every sound, checking the locks compulsively. She knew Derek too well. Men like him didn't accept defeat gracefully. They plotted. Caleb saw the tension eating at her, the way she'd become hypervigilant even during their beach days. Mia had started sleeping in Elena's bed again, and Lily had picked up on the anxiety despite everyone's efforts to shield her from it. The girls still played together with their old enthusiasm, but there was a fragility to it now, like they all knew something precious could shatter at any moment. It was Margaret who finally confronted Elena about it, 3 days after the hearing. They were sitting under the beach umbrella while the girls built their elaborate sand kingdom, and Elena had checked her phone for the 15th time in an hour. "He's not going to text you," Margaret said gently. "The restraining order forbids contact except through lawyers. He doesn't care about court orders. You saw that yourself." Elena's fingers were white-knuckled around her phone. "He's planning something. I can feel it. Maybe. Or maybe you're so used to being under attack that peace feels wrong." Margaret's voice was kind but firm. "You're allowed to relax, Elena. You're allowed to believe the danger might actually be over." "But what if it's not? What if I let my guard down and that's when he strikes?" Caleb had been listening while pretending to focus on the sandcastle moat he was digging. Now he looked up at Elena. What's the worst thing he could do, realistically, with the restraining order in place? Elena was quiet for a long moment, her jaw working. He could disappear with Mia, take her somewhere I can't find her, somewhere the courts can't reach. He has money, connections, the ability to vanish if he wants to. Does he want to, though? Caleb kept his voice level. Because from what I saw in that courtroom, Derek cares more about winning than he cares about Mia. Taking her would be admitting defeat, running away. That doesn't seem like his style. You don't know him like I do. No, but I know bullies, and bullies don't run. They escalate until someone makes them stop. Elena absorbed this, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. So what you're saying is I should be worried about escalation, not kidnapping. I'm saying you should take precautions but also live your life. Don't let him steal your peace on top of everything else he's taken. Margaret nodded her agreement. Caleb's right. Derek wants you afraid, wants you looking over your shoulder constantly. That's its own kind of control. Don't give him that power. I don't know how to not be afraid, Elena admitted quietly. I've been afraid for so long, I don't remember what it feels like to just exist without that constant background terror. Caleb understood that completely. He'd lived with the fear of losing Sarah for years, watching cancer try to take her, then winning, then coming back for a final victorious assault. Even now, weeks after her death, he still woke up sometimes reaching for her, still felt that spike of panic before remembering she was already gone. Start small, he suggested. 1 hour where you don't check your phone. 1 walk where you don't scan every face for Derek. 1 night where you let Mia sleep in her own bed. Elena looked at him with something like hope. You make it sound possible. It is possible. Difficult, but possible. That evening, Elena did let Mia sleep in her own room, though she admitted to Caleb later that she'd checked on her daughter every 30 minutes. But it was a start, a tiny reclamation of normalcy. The peace lasted 6 more days. Caleb was making breakfast when his phone rang with an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Turner? The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. This is Detective Morrison with the local police department. I need to ask you some questions about Elena Brooks and her daughter Mia. Caleb's blood went cold. What happened? Are they okay? They're fine. This is regarding an allegation made by Derek Brooks concerning the welfare of his daughter. He's claiming that you and Ms. Brooks have been engaging in inappropriate behavior around the children and that Mia has been exposed to an unstable environment. The words hit Caleb like a physical blow. This was exactly what Elena had warned him about, Derek's ability to twist reality into weapons. That's completely false. I'm sure it is, but I still need to ask you some questions. Are you available to come down to the station this morning? Am I being accused of something? Not at this time. Mr. Brooks has filed a complaint with Child Protective Services, and we're conducting a routine investigation. The sooner we can talk to everyone involved, the sooner we can clear this up. Caleb's mind was racing. Child Protective Services, an investigation. This could destroy Elena's custody case, could paint her as an unfit mother. And it would all be Derek's lies, but that wouldn't matter if CPS believed him. I'll be there in an hour, Caleb said, but I'm calling my lawyer first. That's your right. See you soon, Mr. Turner. Caleb hung up and immediately called Elena. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight with stress. You got the call too? From Detective Morrison? Yeah, Elena, what the hell is happening? Derek filed a complaint with CPS claiming I'm neglecting Mia by exposing her to inappropriate relationships. He's saying you and I are romantically involved, that we're acting inappropriately in front of the children, that I'm more focused on my new boyfriend than on my daughter's welfare. Elena's voice cracked. It's all lies, Caleb, complete fabrication. But CPS has to investigate, and if they find any reason to question my parenting, they won't, because there's nothing to find. You don't understand. CPS investigations are invasive. They interview neighbors, teachers, anyone who's had contact with Mia. They look for any inconsistency, any suggestion that I'm not putting her first. And Derek will have coached people, planted seeds of doubt. Caleb felt fury building in his chest. Derek wasn't just attacking Elena anymore. He was attacking him too, using Lily's presence as ammunition. What do we do? Tell the truth, cooperate fully, and pray that the investigator can see through Derek's manipulation. Elena took a shaky breath. I'm so sorry, Caleb. I never wanted you dragged into this. Stop apologizing. Derek did this, not you. But you warned me. You said getting close to us would make you a target, and I didn't listen. I was selfish, wanting the support and companionship without thinking about the cost to you. The cost to me is nothing compared to what Derek's trying to do to you and Mia. Caleb looked at Lily, who was eating cereal at the table, oblivious to the chaos swirling around her. I'm calling my lawyer, then I'm going down to the station to give my statement. We're going to fight this together. After hanging up, Caleb explained to Margaret what was happening. Her face went pale, then flushed with anger. That man is truly evil, using Child Protective Services as a weapon like this. I need you to stay with Lily while I go talk to the police. And Margaret, if anyone from CPS contacts you, tell them the truth about everything you've seen, about how Elena parents Mia, about our interactions, all of it. Of course. But Caleb, you should know, this could get complicated. If CPS talks to Lily, asks her questions about you and Elena, she'll tell them the truth. That we're friends, that she and Mia play together, that I've been grieving Sarah. Caleb's voice was firm. There's nothing inappropriate happening, so there's nothing for them to find. His lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, who'd helped him with Sarah's estate, was less optimistic when he called her. CPS investigations are serious, Caleb. Even unfounded ones can take weeks to resolve, and during that time, your relationship with Lily could be scrutinized. As a recent widower, they might question your emotional stability, your ability to parent while grieving. So Derek gets to weaponize my wife's death against me? He gets to raise concerns, and the state has to investigate them. That's how the system works, even when it's being abused. Patricia's tone softened. I'll meet you at the police station. Don't answer any questions until I'm there, and be very careful about how you characterize your relationship with Ms. Brooks. Any ambiguity will be used against you both. The interview at the police station was every bit as invasive as Caleb had feared. Detective Morrison was professional but thorough, asking detailed questions about how he and Elena had met, how much time they spent together, whether they'd been romantic or physically intimate, what the children had witnessed. Caleb answered everything honestly with Patricia beside him, maintaining his composure even as the questions felt designed to trap him into saying something that could be twisted. Yes, he and Elena spent time together. No, they weren't romantically involved. Yes, their daughters were close friends. No, there had never been anything inappropriate in front of the children. Mr. Brooks claims he witnessed you and Miss Brooks embracing on her porch late at night, Detective Morrison said, consulting his notes. He says it appeared intimate and that the children could have seen from the windows. Caleb felt sick. Derek must have been watching them, stalking Elena's house despite the restraining order. I comforted her after she'd had a panic attack. It was a hug between friends, nothing more, and the children were asleep. How can you be sure they were asleep? Because Elena checked on Mia before coming outside, and my daughter was in bed when I left our house. If Derek was close enough to see us on the porch, he was violating the restraining order by being near her property. Detective Morrison made a note of that. Mr. Brooks also claims your daughter has been expressing confusion about her mother's death and your new relationship, that she's been asking why you're replacing her mother so quickly. The accusation was so far from the truth that Caleb almost laughed. But Patricia put a warning hand on his arm, and he controlled himself. My daughter has not expressed any such thing. She's grieving her mother, yes, and she's formed a close friendship with Mia Brooks. Those two things are separate. Lily understands that Elena is my friend and Mia's mother, nothing more. The interview continued for another 45 minutes, circling back over the same territory, looking for inconsistencies. Finally, Detective Morrison closed his notebook. Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Turner. We'll be speaking with Ms. Brooks, her daughter, your daughter, and several other witnesses. If we have additional questions, we'll be in touch. Outside the station, Patricia was blunt. This is bad, Caleb. Even if the investigation concludes there's no wrongdoing, the fact that it happened will be on record. Derek can use it in future custody proceedings, claim that Elena's judgment is questionable. So he wins either way. He creates doubt, which is sometimes just as effective as winning. Patricia studied him carefully. You need to think seriously about whether continuing this friendship is worth the legal complications. I'm not saying you should abandon Ms. Brooks, but you should be aware of the potential consequences. Caleb thought about Mia's face when she laughed with Lily, about Elena's slow emergence from the shell of fear Derek had built around her, about the way his own daughter had started to heal through their connection. Then he thought about Derek, smugly assuming he could terrorize them into submission. I'm not backing down, he said firmly. Derek doesn't get to win by making us afraid. Patricia sighed. Then we prepare for a fight, because this is only the beginning. Elena's interview was even more brutal. The CPS investigator, a tired-looking woman named Sandra Hayes, came to the house unannounced and insisted on speaking with both Elena and Mia separately. Elena called Caleb in tears afterward. They questioned Mia, asked her about you, about whether she'd seen us kissing or sleeping in the same bed, about whether I ignored her when you were around. Elena's voice was raw. She's 6 years old, Caleb. She was terrified, thought she'd done something wrong. What did she tell them? The truth, that you're Lily's daddy, that we play on the beach, that you're nice to her mommy, but they kept asking the questions different ways, like they were trying to catch her in a lie or get her to say something incriminating. Caleb felt rage boiling in his chest. They can't do that. She's a child. They can, and they did. It's part of the investigation. Elena's breath hitched. And now Mia's asking me if she said the wrong things, if she's going to be taken away. I've spent 3 hours trying to convince her she's safe, but I don't even know if that's true anymore. It is true. We're going to fight this, and we're going to win. How can you be so sure? Because we're telling the truth, and Derek is lying. Eventually, that has to matter. But as the investigation continued over the next week, Caleb learned that truth was more complicated than he'd thought. The CPS investigator interviewed their neighbors, several of whom reported seeing Caleb and Elena together frequently, often alone while their children played. One neighbor mentioned seeing them sitting close together on Elena's porch at night. Another noted that Caleb had been at Elena's house late one evening and hadn't left until after midnight. All of it was true. All of it was also completely innocent. But the way Sandra Hayes presented it in her reports made it sound suspicious, questionable, worthy of concern. Margaret's interview helped. She testified clearly and forcefully about the nature of Caleb and Elena's friendship, about how both were grieving and supporting each other, about how the children had formed a healthy, age-appropriate friendship. But she also had to admit that she didn't supervise them every moment, that she couldn't say with certainty that nothing inappropriate had ever occurred. "I trust them both completely," Margaret told the investigator firmly. "I've watched them interact for weeks now, and I've never seen anything that concerned me. What I have seen is two good parents doing their best in difficult circumstances." Lily's interview was the hardest for Caleb to bear. Sandra Hayes spoke with her at their home while Caleb waited in another room, and afterward, Lily climbed into his lap and cried. "Did I say something bad, Daddy? The lady kept asking me about you and Elena and if I was sad about you liking her." Caleb held his daughter close, fury making his hands shake. "You didn't say anything bad, Bug. You told the truth, and that's all anyone can ask. But she made it sound like you were doing something wrong, like you were being mean to Mommy by being friends with Elena." "I'm not being mean to Mommy. Mommy would want us to have friends, to be kind to people who need help. That's what I told the lady, but she kept asking if it made me feel weird or uncomfortable or sad." Lily pulled back to look at him with tear-filled eyes. "I'm not sad that you're friends with Elena. I like Elena. I love Mia. Why does that lady think it's bad?" Caleb struggled to find words that would make sense to a 6-year-old. "Sometimes grown-ups make things complicated that should be simple. You didn't do anything wrong, and neither did I. We just need to be patient while they figure that out." But patience was difficult when every day brought new invasions. Sandra Hayes requested medical records, school records, financial statements. She interviewed Elena's therapist, Caleb's grief counselor, even Sarah's oncologist to verify the timeline of her death. Every aspect of their lives was examined, dissected, documented. Elena started pulling away, the stress making her retreat into herself. She canceled beach plans twice, claiming Mia wasn't feeling well. When Caleb texted to check on her, her responses were brief, distant. He understood what was happening. She was trying to create distance, trying to protect him from further entanglement in Derek's war. He didn't let her. On the 8th day of the investigation, he showed up at her door with takeout from the Thai place she'd mentioned liking. Elena looked exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "You shouldn't be here," she said, but she stepped aside to let him in. "Probably not, but I am anyway." Caleb set the food on her kitchen counter. "Have you eaten today?" "I don't remember." "Then you haven't." He started unpacking containers. "Where's Mia?" "At my mom's. I needed a night to just fall apart without scaring her." "Then fall apart. I'll wait." Elena stared at him for a long moment. Then her face crumpled. Caleb caught her as she collapsed into sobs, holding her while she cried out weeks of accumulated fear and stress and exhaustion. He didn't try to fix it or tell her it would be okay. He just held her, offering the only thing he could, presence. When the storm finally passed, Elena pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry, that was necessary, and nothing to apologize for." Caleb guided her to sit at the table and put food in front of her. "Eat. Then talk if you want to, or don't talk. Either way, I'm not leaving you alone tonight." Elena picked at her food, then started eating properly, her body apparently remembering it needed fuel. After a few minutes, she spoke quietly. "Sandra Hayes told me today that she's recommending my case stay open for continued monitoring. Not that I'm an unfit mother, but that there are concerns about my judgment and Mia's exposure to an unstable situation." Caleb felt his stomach drop. "What does that mean?" "It means Derek partially won. He didn't get them to take Mia away, but he created an official record of concern. He can use that in future custody battles, argue that I have a history of questionable decisions." Elena's voice was flat, defeated. and she specifically cited my relationship with you as one of the concerns. Not that you're dangerous, but that I'm relying too heavily on someone I barely know during a vulnerable time, potentially putting my need for companionship above Mia's need for stability. That's insane. That's family court. Everything gets twisted until support looks like dependency, friendship looks like inappropriate attachment, and trying to heal looks like instability. Elena set down her fork. Caleb, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Okay? Do you regret this? Getting involved with us? Having your life torn apart by investigators? Having Lily questioned like she witnessed a crime? Because I would understand if you did. I would understand if you wanted to walk away and never look back. Caleb thought about the question carefully. Did he regret the complications? The stress? The invasion of privacy? The way Derek had weaponized his grief against him? No, he said finally. I don't regret it. I regret that Derek is a vindictive bastard who uses his own daughter as a pawn. I regret that the system allows people like him to abuse it. But I don't regret knowing you and Mia, and I don't regret being here. Why not? We've brought you nothing but trouble. You've brought me back to life. The words came out before Caleb could think about them, raw and honest. For weeks after Sarah died, I was just going through motions, existing without living. But you and Mia reminded me that connection matters, that showing up for people matters, that there are still things worth fighting for. He leaned forward. So no, Elena, I don't regret this. And I'm not walking away. Elena's eyes filled with tears again, but she smiled through them. You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the most stubborn. Probably both. They ate in comfortable silence, and slowly Caleb watched some of the tension leave Elena's shoulders. When they finished, she helped him clean up, and they moved to her living room. Can I ask you something now? Caleb said. Fair's fair. What do you want? Not what Derek wants. Not what the courts say, not what's safe or strategic. What do you actually want? Elena was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I want to stop being afraid. I want Mia to grow up knowing she's loved and safe, and that her worth isn't determined by whether her father decides to show up. I want to trust people again without constantly waiting for them to betray me. She looked up at Caleb. And I want you in my life. Not as a romantic thing necessarily, though I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about it, but as someone who sees me, really sees me, and doesn't run away from what they find. That's what I want. Caleb felt something shift in his chest, like a door he'd kept locked was suddenly opening. He'd told himself repeatedly that what he and Elena had was friendship, mutual support between two broken people, and it was that. But it was also something more. Something he'd been afraid to acknowledge because acknowledging it felt like betraying Sarah. I want that too, he admitted. And it terrifies me. Not because of Derek or investigations or what people might think, because I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if 3 months is enough time to grieve a wife I loved for 14 years. There's no timeline for these things, Caleb. You know that. Intellectually, yes. Emotionally? He shook his head. I feel guilty every time I enjoy being with you. Guilty that I'm not thinking about Sarah every moment. Guilty that part of me is already imagining a future that doesn't include her. Elena reached over and took his hand, the gesture simple but profound. Sarah wanted you to keep living. You told me that yourself. She wanted you and Lily to find joy again. Would she want you to punish yourself for doing what she asked? No. But knowing what she'd want and feeling okay about it are different things. Then we take it slow. We figure it out as we go. We don't put labels on things or rush into anything we're not ready for. Elena squeezed his hand. But we also don't let Derek's manipulation push us apart. We don't let fear make our decisions for us. What about the CPS investigation? What about Sandra Hayes' concerns about your judgment? I'll appeal her recommendation. I'll show that I'm making good choices for Mia, that having supportive people in our lives is healthy, not harmful. And if the court doesn't agree, if they keep monitoring me because I refuse to isolate myself, Elena's voice grew stronger, then at least I'll know I didn't let Derek control me anymore, that I chose my own life instead of letting his threats dictate it. Caleb felt pride swell in his chest. This was the Elena he'd glimpsed that first morning on the beach, the woman who'd worn a red bikini like armor and dared the world to judge her. She'd been beaten down by Derek's systematic abuse, but she hadn't been broken. She was still fighting. "Then we fight together," he said. "Whatever comes next, we face it as a team." Elena smiled, genuine and bright despite the tears on her cheeks. "As a team? I like that." Well, they talked late into the night about their fears and hopes, about Sarah and Derek and the complicated process of healing from loss. Caleb told her things he hadn't told anyone, how he sometimes forgot Sarah was dead and reached for her in the morning, how he felt like he was failing Lily every day, how grief felt like drowning in slow motion. Elena shared her own struggles, the nightmares about Derek finding ways to take Mia, the constant second-guessing of every parenting decision, the way she sometimes looked at her daughter and saw all the ways she'd already failed her by staying with Derek as long as she had. They didn't offer each other platitudes or false reassurances. They just listened, witnessed, held space for the messy reality of trying to survive impossible things. When Caleb finally stood to leave around midnight, Elena walked him to the door. They stood there awkwardly for a moment, both aware of how Derek had twisted even innocent gestures into weapons. "Thank you," Elena said softly, "for showing up, for staying, for not letting me push you away. Thank you for not succeeding in pushing me away. You're very determined when you try." She laughed. "I learned from the best. Derek taught me that persistence can be a weapon. I'm choosing to make it a strength instead." Caleb wanted to hug her, but he was too aware of how it might look, how Derek might be watching even now. So instead he just smiled and said goodnight, walking the short distance home with his hands in his pockets and his mind racing. The investigation concluded 2 days later. Sandra Hayes' final report acknowledged that there was no evidence of abuse or neglect, no proof that Mia was in danger or that Elena's parenting was deficient. However, the report maintained its recommendation for continued monitoring, citing Elena's reliance on a new relationship during a stressful period and the potential for instability. It was a hollow victory. They'd been cleared but also marked, flagged for future scrutiny. Elena's lawyer immediately filed an appeal, but the process would take months. Derek, meanwhile, sent a smug message through his lawyer. He was pleased that the court was taking Mia's welfare seriously and hoped this would encourage Elena to reconsider their custody arrangement. The subtext was clear. He'd proven he could make their lives difficult, and he'd do it again if she didn't comply. But something had changed in Elena during the investigation. Instead of retreating in fear, she came out swinging. She filed a motion to have Derek's custody reduced to supervised visits only, citing his pattern of harassment and his weaponization of CPS as evidence of his unwillingness to co-parent healthily. She documented every restraining order violation, every manipulative communication, every instance where he'd put his need to control her above Mia's actual welfare. Her lawyer warned her it was risky, that judges didn't like to completely sever parental rights. But Elena was done playing defense. "Let him take me to court," she told Caleb the day after filing the motion. "Let him stand in front of a judge and explain why he filed false CPS reports, why he's violated restraining orders, why his own daughter is afraid of him. I'm tired of trying to manage his dysfunction. It's time he faced consequences." Caleb recognized the shift in her, from victim to fighter, from someone trying to survive to someone demanding better. It was beautiful and terrifying to watch. The hearing for Elena's motion was scheduled for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, they fell back into their routine with new determination. Beach mornings with the girls, evening walks while Margaret supervised the children, quiet conversations on porches after bedtime. They were careful, always aware of potential surveillance, but they refused to hide. Lily and Mia remained blissfully unaware of most of the adult drama, focused on their friendship and their elaborate fantasy games. Watching them, Caleb was reminded of why all the legal battles mattered. These children deserved to be allowed to just be children, to play and laugh and not worry about whether their parents could be together. "Do you think they'll remember this summer?" Elena asked one evening as they watched the girls chase waves. "I think they'll remember the important parts, the friendship, the joy, the feeling of being safe and loved." "I hope so. I hope when Mia looks back, she remembers the healing, not the fear." "She will. Because you're showing her every day that fear doesn't have to win, that we can choose to keep living even when it's hard." Caleb glanced at her. You're teaching her to be strong by being strong yourself. I don't feel strong most days. I feel like I'm barely holding it together. That's what strength looks like sometimes. Not the absence of fear, but the choice to keep moving forward despite it. Elena smiled at him, and Caleb felt that now familiar flutter in his chest. He still didn't know what to call what they had, still wasn't ready to define it. But it was real, and it mattered, and he was done apologizing for it. 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation, depositions, and strategy sessions with lawyers. Derek's attorney tried every angle to paint Elena as unstable, vindictive, manipulative. They brought up the CPS investigation, her history of mental health treatment after leaving Derek, even questioned whether her job as a family law attorney made her too aggressive in custody matters. But Elena's lawyer was prepared. She had documented evidence of Derek's abuse, testimonies from Mia's therapist about the child's fear of her father, records of every restraining order violation. Most damning was Derek's own CPS complaint, filed with demonstrably false information and clearly intended to harass rather than protect. The hearing lasted 6 hours. Caleb wasn't allowed in the courtroom since he might be called as a witness, so he waited in the hallway with Margaret, both of them tense and silent. When Elena finally emerged, her face was unreadable. "Well?" Caleb asked. Elena looked at him, then at Margaret, then back at Caleb. Slowly, a smile spread across her face. Genuine, triumphant, free. Supervised visits only. 1 hour a week at a neutral location with a court-appointed supervisor present. No phone contact except supervised video calls twice a week. And if he violates any term of the order, he loses even that. Elena's voice broke with relief. The judge said Derek's pattern of behavior demonstrated a concerning lack of regard for Mia's emotional welfare, and that until he completed anger management and co-parenting classes, unsupervised time was not in the child's best interest. Margaret let out a whoop of joy and pulled Elena into a fierce hug. Caleb felt tears prick his eyes. Not his battle, but he'd fought alongside her, and this victory mattered. When Margaret released her, Elena turned to Caleb. For a moment, they just looked at each other, all the words they'd never quite said hanging in the air between them. Then Elena stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, and Caleb held her close, right there in the courthouse hallway where anyone could see. He didn't care. Let Derek's lawyers document it. Let CPS add it to their files. This was real and important, and he was done pretending otherwise. "Thank you," Elena whispered against his shoulder, "for not leaving, for staying even when it got terrible, for believing I could win. You didn't need me to win. You did that yourself. Maybe, but having you beside me made it bearable." They pulled apart slowly, both aware of Margaret watching with tears in her eyes. Elena wiped her face and straightened her shoulders. "I need to pick up Mia from my mom's, tell her the good news. She's going to be so relieved." "She's going to be ecstatic," Caleb corrected. "Do you want us to come with you?" Elena considered, then nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that. I'd like Mia to see that we all fought for this together, that families can be built, not just born." They drove to Elena's mother's house together, Margaret and Caleb following in his car. When they arrived, Mia came running out and launched herself at Elena, who caught her and spun her around. "The judge said you're safe, baby. You only have to see Daddy when there's someone there to make sure everyone's okay, and only if you want to." Mia pulled back to look at her mother's face, searching for truth. "Really? I don't have to go to his house alone anymore." "Really? You're safe?" Mia started crying, then laughing, then crying again. She reached for Caleb with one arm while keeping the other around Elena, and he came forward to complete the circle. Lily and Margaret joined them, and for a moment they stood in a messy, joyful tangle of relief and triumph and chosen family. It wasn't the end of the battle. Derek would appeal, would continue to be a presence in Mia's life, would probably find new ways to make things difficult. But it was a victory that mattered, a line in the sand that said enough. That night, after Mia was asleep and Elena had finally stopped shaking from adrenaline, she and Caleb sat on her porch under the stars. They didn't talk much, didn't need to. They'd said everything that mattered in the weeks of crisis, and the decision to stay when leaving would have been easier. "What happens now?" Elena asked eventually. "Now we live," Caleb said simply. "We stop letting Derek dictate our choices. We stop hiding or second-guessing every interaction. We figure out what we want this to be on our own timeline without fear. That sounds nice. Scary, but nice. The best things usually are. Elena leaned her head on his shoulder, and Caleb wrapped an arm around her. It felt right in a way he'd stopped believing anything could feel right. Not a replacement for what he'd lost, but something new and valuable in its own right. Somewhere in the house, Mia was sleeping without nightmares for the first time in weeks. Down the beach in the rental cottage, Lily was curled up with her stuffed rabbit, healing in ways that had nothing to do with forgetting her mother and everything to do with learning that life could still hold joy. And here on this porch, two people who'd been broken by loss and abuse were learning that survival didn't have to mean being alone, that strength could be found in connection, that families could be chosen with intention and love. The beach at dawn still belonged to ghosts, but the beach at night, under the stars, belonged to them. And that was enough. The morning after the custody hearing, Elena woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom window and the sound of Mia singing in the next room. For the first time in 2 years, she didn't immediately tense with anxiety, didn't reach for her phone to check for threatening messages from Derek, didn't run through worst-case scenarios before her feet hit the floor. The court order was in place. Mia was safe. They could finally breathe. She found her daughter in the kitchen attempting to make breakfast, cereal scattered across the counter, milk dripping onto the floor. Any other morning, Elena might have worried about the mess, but today she just laughed and pulled Mia into a hug. "What are you doing, little bug?" "Making a celebration breakfast, because we won." Mia's face was radiant. "We don't have to be scared anymore, right, Mommy?" Elena felt her throat tighten. "Right, baby. We don't have to be scared anymore." They cleaned up the cereal disaster together and made pancakes instead, Mia chattering nonstop about all the things she wanted to do now that the scary part was over. She wanted to have a beach party with Lily. She wanted to learn to swim in the deep water. She wanted to build the biggest sandcastle anyone had ever seen. "Can Caleb and Lily come over today?" Mia asked, pouring way too much syrup on her pancakes. "I want to tell Lily about how the judge was really nice and said I get to choose." "I think they're probably sleeping in after yesterday. It was a long day for everyone." But even as Elena said it, her phone buzzed with a text from Caleb. "Morning. Lily's been up since 6 asking when we can see Mia. She wants to make sure yesterday was real and her best friend is okay." Elena smiled and typed back. "Mia's doing the same thing. Beach in an hour? We'll be there." An hour later, they met at their usual spot, and the girls immediately ran to each other like they'd been separated for weeks instead of one day. Lily threw her arms around Mia, and Mia spun her around, both of them giggling. "My mommy won," Mia announced. "The judge said I'm safe. My daddy helped," Lily said proudly. "He told the truth and was really brave." Caleb looked embarrassed. "I just answered some questions, Bug." "But you were there. That's what matters." Lily looked at him seriously. "Right, Daddy? Being there is the most important thing?" "Yeah, sweetheart. Being there is the most important thing." The girls ran off to start their castle construction, and Margaret settled under the umbrella with a book, giving Caleb and Elena space to walk. They headed down the beach in comfortable silence, letting the sound of waves fill the space between words. "How are you really doing?" Caleb asked after a while. "Honestly, I feel like I've been holding my breath for 2 years and I'm just now remembering how to exhale." Elena picked up a shell, turning it over in her fingers. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Derek to find some new way to attack, but maybe that's just going to take time to get over." "Probably. Trauma doesn't just disappear because the immediate danger is gone." "Speaking from experience?" "Every night I still wake up thinking Sarah's in bed beside me. Every morning I still feel surprised all over again that she's not. My therapist says it's normal, that grief rewires your brain and it takes time to adjust." Caleb glanced at her. "I imagine learning to trust your safety again after years of abuse is similar." Elena nodded. "My therapist says the same thing. She keeps reminding me that healing isn't linear, that I'm allowed to have setbacks and still be making progress." They walked in silence for a few more minutes, then Elena stopped and turned to face the ocean. Caleb stopped beside her, waiting. "I want to do something," Elena said quietly. "Something symbolic, something that marks this as a new beginning. But I don't know what." "What did you do to celebrate leaving Derek the first time?" I didn't. I was too scared, too focused on just surviving the divorce and protecting Mia. There was no celebration, just constant vigilance. Then maybe that's what you need now. A real celebration. A way to acknowledge that you won, that you took your life back. Elena considered this, then smiled slowly. I know exactly what I want to do. 20 minutes later, she was standing at the edge of the water in the red bikini she'd worn that first morning, the one Caleb had seen her in when they met. But this time, there was no armor in it, no defiance. Just a woman reclaiming joy. You're really going in? Caleb asked, remembering all those mornings she'd stood at the water's edge and couldn't make herself take the plunge. I'm really going in. Will you come with me? Caleb looked down at his shorts and t-shirt. I'm not exactly dressed for swimming. So get undressed, or come in as you are. I don't care. I just don't want to do this alone. There was something vulnerable in the request, something that made Caleb understand this wasn't just about swimming. This was about Elena proving to herself that she could do hard things, that she could choose discomfort and survive it, that she was brave enough to embrace life fully instead of just enduring it. Okay, he said, pulling off his shirt. Let's do this. They waded in together, the cold water making them both gasp. Elena laughed, the sound bright and free, and Caleb felt something in his chest loosen at the sound of it. When the water reached their waists, Elena dove under, disappearing beneath the surface and emerging a few feet away, water streaming from her hair. It's freezing, she shouted, laughing. It's absolutely freezing, and I love it. Caleb dove under too, the shock of cold erasing everything except the immediate sensation of being alive, present, here. When he surfaced, Elena was floating on her back, her face turned toward the sun, smiling like she'd just discovered something precious. I did it, she said, more to herself than to him. I finally did it. They stayed in the water for 10 minutes, just long enough to prove they could, then stumbled back to shore, shivering and exhilarated. Margaret had towels waiting and a knowing smile on her face. Feel better? She asked Elena. So much better. I feel like I just washed off 2 years of fear. Good. You deserve to wash it off. They spent the rest of the morning on the beach, the girls building their masterpiece castle, while the adults watched and occasionally contributed architectural advice. Around noon, Margaret stood and brushed sand from her pants. I'm going to head back and make lunch. Caleb, can I talk to you for a minute? They walked a little way down the beach, and Margaret turned to face him with a serious expression. I'm leaving tomorrow. Going back home. Caleb felt surprise and something like panic. What? Why? I thought you were staying for the whole summer. I was, but Caleb, the whole point of this summer was for you and Lily to learn how to be a family again, just the two of you. You don't need me hovering anymore. We do need you. Lily needs you. Lily needs you. And she's healing, really healing, but part of that healing is learning that her world can be just you two, and that's enough. Margaret's expression was gentle but firm. Besides, you and Elena need space to figure out whatever this is between you, and you won't do that with me playing chaperone. There's nothing to figure out, we're friends. Margaret gave him a look that said she didn't believe that for a second. Caleb, I'm not blind. I've watched you two all summer. The way you look at her, the way she lights up when you're around, the way you've built this life together without even realizing it. That's not just friendship. It's only been 3 months since Sarah died. I know. And if you're not ready for anything more than friendship, that's fine. But don't hide behind grief as an excuse not to examine your feelings. Margaret squeezed his arm. Sarah loved you. She wanted you to keep living, to find joy again, to not be alone forever. You honoring her memory doesn't mean punishing yourself for developing feelings for someone else. Caleb felt his eyes burn. What if I can't love someone else the way I loved her? What if anything I feel for Elena is just because she's here and I'm lonely and grieving? What if it's not? What if you're capable of loving more than one person in your lifetime, each in their own way? Margaret's voice was soft. Caleb, you're 42 years old. You could have another 40 years ahead of you. Are you really going to spend all of them alone because you loved Sarah too much to risk loving again? I don't know if I can do it. The vulnerability, the possibility of loss. I can't survive losing someone again. You can't guarantee you won't lose someone. That's life. But you can choose to live anyway, to take the risk because the alternative is shutting yourself off from everything good. Margaret hugged him. I'm not telling you to marry Elena tomorrow. I'm just telling you to be honest with yourself about what you want, and to give yourself permission to want it. That night, after Margaret had told Lily about her departure and weathered the resulting tears, after promises of video calls and visits, after Lily had finally gone to bed clutching her stuffed rabbit and asking Caleb 3 times if he was sure he wasn't leaving too, Caleb found himself on the porch again. He wasn't surprised when Elena appeared a few minutes later, climbing the steps with 2 bottles of beer. Saw your light on. Figured you might need company. Margaret's leaving tomorrow. I know, she texted me. Elena handed him a beer and sat in the chair beside his. How are you feeling about it? Terrified. Relieved. Guilty about being relieved. The usual complicated mess. Sounds about right. Elena was quiet for a moment. She told me something today. She said I was good for you, that she hadn't seen you smile like this in years. I wasn't sure if I should tell you that or if it would make things weird. Everything between us is already weird. Might as well embrace it. Elena laughed. Fair point. She took a sip of her beer, then said carefully, Can I ask you something, and will you promise to answer honestly, even if the answer is uncomfortable? Okay. What are we doing here, Caleb? What is this thing between us? Caleb had known this conversation was coming, had been both dreading and anticipating it. He took a long drink of his beer, gathering his thoughts. Honestly, I don't know. I know it's important. I know I look forward to seeing you every day, that I think about you when we're apart, that watching you win against Derek felt almost as good as any victory of my own. He paused. I know that sometimes when you smile at me, I forget to feel guilty about not thinking about Sarah every second, and I know that terrifies me. Because you think feeling something for me means betraying her? Because I don't know how to love someone new without it feeling like I'm replacing what I had. And I don't want to use you as some kind of emotional placeholder while I'm still grieving. Elena was quiet for a long moment, processing this. Can I tell you what I think? Please. I think grief and new feelings can coexist. I think you can honor what you had with Sarah while also being open to something different with someone else. And I think the fact that you're worried about using me means you won't, because you're too aware of it. She turned to look at him. I'm not asking you to love me the way you loved her. I'm not asking you to stop grieving or to move on before you're ready. I'm just asking you to be honest about what you feel, whatever that is. What do you feel? Elena smiled. Scared, hopeful, confused, grateful. Attracted to you in ways that terrify me because I swore I was done with men after Derek, that I didn't need anyone, that Mia and I were enough. She set down her beer. But then you showed up with your quiet strength and your dad jokes and your complete inability to be anything other than genuine, and you made me remember that not all men are Derek, that some men show up, tell the truth, and don't run when things get hard. I'm not as great as you're making me sound. I'm not making you sound great. I'm making you sound human and decent and present. That's not great, it's just basic. But after Derek, basic feels revolutionary. Caleb laughed despite himself. So we're both terrified and confused and attracted to each other, but not sure what to do about it? Sounds about right. What if we just take it one day at a time? No labels, no pressure, no expectations. We just keep doing what we're doing and see where it goes. Elena considered this. That actually sounds perfect. No rushing, no forcing anything, just being honest and present and seeing what develops. And if it develops into something more, then we deal with that when it happens. Together. They sat in comfortable silence, the tension of undefined feelings eased by the agreement to let things unfold naturally. Caleb felt lighter than he had in months, like some burden he'd been carrying had finally been set down. Can I tell you something? Elena said after a while. Something I've never told anyone? Always. That first morning when we met, when I was standing there in my red bikini trying to make myself brave enough to go in the water, I saw you walking toward me, and my first thought was that you looked as broken as I felt. And instead of being scared of that, I felt relieved, like maybe I'd found someone who understood. I felt the same thing. Your eyes had the same look mine did in the mirror. We were both drowning. We still are, sometimes. But maybe we're learning to swim too. Elena reached over and took his hand, the gesture simple but profound. They sat like that, hands linked, watching the moonlight on the water, two people learning that healing didn't mean forgetting, that moving forward didn't require leaving the past behind, that love could take many forms and all of them could be real. Margaret left the next morning with hugs and tears and promises to return for visits. Lily cried for an hour after she drove away, then rallied with the resilience of children everywhere. By afternoon, she and Mia were back to their usual activities, building castles and collecting shells and creating elaborate fantasy games. The next 3 weeks developed a new rhythm. Caleb and Elena were more intentional about their time together, carving out moments that were just for them, while also respecting the space they each needed to process their separate traumas. Some nights they sat on one of their porches and talked for hours. Other nights they barely spoke, just existing in each other's company while reading or watching the girls play. Caleb found himself laughing more, the grief still present but no longer consuming every moment. He started sleeping through the night without nightmares of hospitals and hospice beds. He began thinking about the future beyond just surviving the next day. Elena bloomed in the safety of Derek's restricted access. Her shoulders loosened, her smile came easier, her laughter was no longer edged with anxiety. Mia thrived too, the fear slowly leaving her eyes, replaced by the confidence of a child who knew she was protected. The supervised visits with Derek were awkward and strained. He showed up with expensive gifts and hollow promises, performing fatherhood for the court-appointed supervisor, while Mia sat stiffly in her chair, answering his questions in monosyllables. After the third visit, she asked Elena if she had to keep going. "What does your heart tell you?" Elena asked, crouching down to Mia's level. "My heart says I don't want to see him. He's not nice to you, and he only pretends to care about me when other people are watching." Elena felt her chest tighten with pride and sadness, pride that her daughter could articulate her feelings so clearly, sadness that she had to make such choices at 6 years old. "Then you don't have to go. The judge said it was your choice." "He won't be mad." "He might be. But that's his feeling to manage, not yours. You're allowed to protect yourself, baby." Mia thought about this, then nodded. "Okay, I don't want to see him anymore. Not until he learns to be actually nice instead of pretend nice." Elena called her lawyer that afternoon, and the supervised visits were suspended pending Derek's completion of the court-mandated therapy. He protested, of course, claimed Elena was alienating him from his daughter, but the supervisor's reports backed up Mia's assessment. Derek was performing, not connecting, focused on his image rather than his child's emotional needs. With Derek truly out of the picture, Elena seemed to unfold like a flower that had been kept in the dark. She started making plans beyond just surviving, talking about taking Mia to visit her mother more often, considering a job change to something less stressful than family law, dreaming out loud about the life she wanted to build. And increasingly, those dreams included Caleb and Lily. It happened gradually, almost without them noticing. Dinners together became routine rather than special occasions. The girls assumed they'd see each other every day. Caleb started keeping ingredients for Elena's favorite coffee at his place. Elena had spare clothes for Lily at her house in case they got wet at the beach. They were building a life together, piece by piece, without ever officially deciding to do so. It was Lily who brought it into the open, 4 weeks before the end of summer. They were all at the beach, the girls building what had become their signature castle, when she looked up at Caleb with her serious face. "Daddy, what happens when summer is over?" Caleb felt his stomach drop. He'd been deliberately not thinking about that question, avoiding the reality that their rental was only through August, that eventually they'd have to return to their real lives. "What do you mean, Bug? Do we have to go back home, away from Mia and Elena?" Caleb saw Elena tense, saw her trying to look busy with the sandcastle while clearly listening intently. Mia had stopped digging too, waiting for his answer. "Well, we do have to go back to our house eventually. Your school starts in September, and—" "But Mia goes to school too. We could go to the same school." Lily's eyes were bright with the kind of hope that could break a parent's heart. "We could live near each other and play every day, and it wouldn't have to end." Mia was nodding enthusiastically. "Yes, we could be neighbors, like we are now but forever." Caleb looked at Elena helplessly, and she gave him a small smile that said she was just as unprepared for this conversation as he was. Girls, it's not that simple, Elena started. Caleb and Lily live far away from us, and how far? Lily interrupted. About 2 hours, Caleb said. That's not that far. We could visit all the time, or we could move closer, or you could move closer to us. Lily was building momentum now, her 6-year-old logic finding solutions to every obstacle. We're family now, right? Families are supposed to stay together. Bug, we're friends with Elena and Mia, but we love them and they love us. That makes us family. Lily's voice was rising, tears threatening. You said family isn't just born, it's built. We built this. We can't just throw it away because summer's over. Caleb felt like he'd been punched. She was right. She was absolutely right. And he had no idea how to respond. He looked at Elena again and saw his own turmoil reflected in her face. Lily, sweetheart, come here. Caleb pulled his daughter onto his lap. You're right that we love them. And you're right that we've built something special this summer. But grown-up lives are complicated. We have houses and jobs and responsibilities that we can't just change overnight. But you could change them slowly, right? Over time? Lily looked up at him with those eyes that were so much like Sarah's. Mommy would want us to be happy. She told you that. And being with Elena and Mia makes us happy. Elena made a small sound, and when Caleb looked at her, there were tears streaming down her face. She stood abruptly. Girls, I need to talk to Caleb alone for a minute. Why don't you two work on the castle's moat? Mia and Lily exchanged looks that said they knew exactly what they'd done, then went back to their digging with suspicious enthusiasm. Elena and Caleb walked down the beach until they were out of earshot. I'm sorry, Caleb said immediately. I should have talked to her about this before. Don't apologize. She's right. About all of it. Elena wrapped her arms around herself. I've been avoiding thinking about the end of summer too, pretending we could just stay in this bubble forever. But we can't. Eventually you have to go back to your life, and I have to figure out mine. And what if we didn't? Elena stopped walking. What? What if we didn't go back to separate lives? What if we figured out how to make this work beyond summer? Caleb felt his heart racing. I know it's complicated. I know it's fast. But Lily's right. We have built something here, something worth keeping. Caleb, you live 2 hours away. You have a house, a community, Sarah's memory embedded in every part of your life there. I can't ask you to leave all that. You're not asking. I'm offering. He took a breath. I've been thinking about this for weeks, trying to figure out how to bring it up without sounding crazy. But the truth is, going back to that house without Sarah feels impossible. Everything there reminds me of what I lost. Maybe it's time for a fresh start somewhere new. Are you serious right now? Completely serious. I can work from anywhere. That's the beauty of software engineering. Lily can change schools. We could find a place near you, start building a real life instead of just a summer vacation. Elena stared at him like he'd grown a second head. You're talking about uprooting your entire life. For what? A woman you've known for 2 months? A relationship that doesn't even have a label yet? I'm talking about choosing the future instead of clinging to the past. About giving Lily a chance at the happiness she deserves. About... Caleb stopped, then decided to just say it. About building a life with you, if you want that too. Of course I want that. But wanting it and having it be the right decision are different things. Elena's voice cracked. What if you move here and then realize you made a mistake? What if you resent me for making you leave your home? What if this thing between us can't survive real life instead of beach vacation magic? Then we'll figure it out, together. Caleb moved closer. Elena, I can't promise you forever. I can't promise everything will work out perfectly, but I can promise I'll show up, tell the truth, and choose you every day for as long as you want me to. Isn't that enough to start with? Elena was crying openly now. You're asking me to trust that this is real, that you're real, that I won't wake up and find out this was all too good to be true. I know trust is hard for you. Derek destroyed it systematically, but I'm not him. I won't disappear when things get difficult. I won't make promises I can't keep. Caleb reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. I love you, Elena. I didn't plan to, didn't think I was ready to, but I do. And I love Mia. And I want to build a life with both of you, messy and complicated and real. Elena let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. You love me? Yeah, I really do. I love you too. So much it terrifies me. Then let's be terrified together. Elena kissed him then, right there on the beach in full daylight, where anyone could see. It was their first kiss, tentative and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, both of them were crying and smiling. This is crazy, Elena whispered. Completely insane. When would you even move? I could start looking for places next week. Put my house on the market in September. Be settled in time for the school year, or shortly after. Caleb was surprised by how much he'd already thought this through, how ready he was to actually do it. Unless you need more time to think about it. I don't want to pressure you. Are you kidding? I've been mentally decorating our combined household for 3 weeks. Elena laughed. I just didn't think you'd actually want the same thing. I want exactly the same thing. They walked back to find the girls watching them with barely contained excitement. Clearly they'd been monitoring from a distance, and clearly they'd seen the kiss. Does this mean we get to stay together? Lily asked, bouncing on her toes. It means we're going to try, Caleb said carefully. It means Daddy's going to look for a house near Elena and Mia, and we're going to figure out how to be a family even when summer ends. Both girls screamed with joy and launched themselves at the adults, resulting in a chaotic group hug full of sand and tears and laughter. When they finally separated, Mia looked up at Elena with shining eyes. Are we going to live together? Not right away, sweetheart. Caleb and Lily will have their own house nearby. We'll take things slow, make sure everyone's comfortable. But eventually? Mia pressed. Elena looked at Caleb, who smiled and shrugged. Eventually, maybe, if that's what everyone wants. I want it, Lily declared. Me too, Mia agreed. Then I guess we're outvoted, Caleb said, pulling Elena close. The last weeks of summer passed in a blur of house hunting and planning and savoring every moment of their remaining vacation time. Caleb found a rental house 3 blocks from Elena's cottage, available starting in September. It wasn't permanent, but it was a start, a commitment to making this work. He drove back to his old house one weekend to start the process of putting it on the market and packing up their lives. Walking through the rooms he'd shared with Sarah was harder than he'd expected, each space filled with memories that made his chest ache. But he also felt her presence in a different way, felt what he could only describe as approval, like she was telling him it was okay to move forward. Margaret came to help him pack, and they spent hours sorting through Sarah's things, deciding what to keep for Lily and what to donate. It was painful, but also cathartic, a way of honoring Sarah while making space for what came next. She'd be happy for you, Margaret said as they boxed up Sarah's books. She really would. Elena's good for you, good for Lily. I know, but it still feels strange packing up our life like this. You're not erasing her, Caleb. You're just making room for more love alongside the memory of what you had. There's a difference. The night before they were set to leave the beach house, Elena and Caleb took one last walk alone while the girls slept. They went to the spot where they'd first met, where Elena had stood in her red bikini daring the ocean to judge her, where Caleb had been drowning in fresh grief. Hard to believe that was only 2.5 months ago, Elena said, staring at the water. It feels like a lifetime. Feels like yesterday and forever ago at the same time. Are we crazy to do this? To upend everything based on a summer romance? Probably, but I'd rather be crazy with you than safe and alone. Elena leaned against him, and they stood in comfortable silence, watching the waves. After a while, she spoke quietly. Derek's lawyer contacted me yesterday. He wants to negotiate a new custody arrangement now that Derek's completed his court-mandated therapy. Caleb felt his body tense. What kind of arrangement? He's willing to drop the fight for unsupervised visits if I agree to reduce child support and give him more decision-making power over Mia's education and medical care. Elena's voice was flat. It's a trap, of course. He doesn't actually care about those things. He just wants to maintain some control. What are you going to do? Tell him no. I'm done negotiating with terrorists. Elena straightened her shoulders. He has supervised visits if Mia wants them. That's what the court decided, and that's what stands. If he wants to change it, he can petition the court again and lose again. Caleb felt pride surge through him. Good. I'm not the same person I was when I left him. I'm not even the same person I was at the beginning of summer. He can't scare me anymore." "No, he really can't." They turned to walk back and Elena caught his hand. "Thank you for that. For helping me find my strength again." "You always had it. I just stood beside you while you remembered." The next morning, they packed up the beach houses and said goodbye to the place that had changed all their lives. The girls were sad to leave, but excited about the new adventure, already planning how they'd decorate Caleb and Lily's new house. 3 weeks later, Caleb and Lily moved into their rental house 3 blocks from Elena and Mia. It was smaller than their old house, more modern, with none of the history and memories that had made their previous home both comforting and painful. Lily loved it immediately, declaring her new room perfect and insisting they paint it purple. The first few weeks of adjustment were bumpy. Lily struggled with her new school, missing her old friends and teachers. Caleb struggled with the logistics of working remotely while parenting solo. Elena and Mia struggled with incorporating 2 more people into their carefully constructed routine, but they figured it out, day by day, stumble by stumble. Elena helped Lily navigate her new school's social landscape. Caleb took over some of the cooking when Elena had late work nights. The girls had sleepovers that rotated between houses. Slowly, carefully, they wove their lives together. 2 months after the move, on a Saturday morning in late October, Caleb woke to find Lily standing beside his bed. "Daddy, can I ask you something?" "Always, bug." "Do you think Mommy would be okay with us being happy? Like really, truly happy, not just pretending?" Caleb pulled her up onto the bed and wrapped his arms around her. "I think Mommy wanted nothing more than for us to be happy." "Why are you asking?" "Because I am happy, really happy. I love our new house and my new school and spending time with Mia and Elena, but sometimes I feel bad about it, like I'm forgetting Mommy by being happy." "Oh, sweetheart, being happy doesn't mean forgetting. We can hold both things at the same time, missing Mommy and loving our new life. They don't cancel each other out." "You promise?" "I promise. And I think Mommy is watching us and smiling because we're not just surviving anymore, we're actually living." Lily was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Okay. Then I'm going to let myself be happy without feeling bad about it." "That sounds like a good plan." That afternoon, all 4 of them went to the beach. It was colder now, the summer crowds long gone, but the girls didn't care. They built a castle, collected shells, and shrieked at the icy water just like they had in July. Caleb watched them play, Elena warm beside him, and felt something he hadn't felt since before Sarah got sick. Peace. Not the absence of grief or struggle or uncertainty, but the deep knowledge that whatever came next, he could handle it. They could handle it together. "What are you thinking about?" Elena asked, following his gaze to the girls. "About how life never turns out the way you expect. How sometimes the worst things lead to unexpected gifts. You calling me a gift, Turner? I'm calling all of this a gift. You, Mia, this second chance at building a family." He pulled her closer. "I'm calling it grace." Elena tilted her face up to kiss him, and Caleb kissed her back, no longer caring who saw or what anyone thought. This was his life now, messy and complicated and beautiful, built from grief and survival and the stubborn choice to keep showing up, keep trying, keep loving even when it was scary. The girls ran over, demanding help with their castle's tower. Caleb and Elena got up and joined them, kneeling in the cold sand, building something that would wash away with the tide but mattered anyway because they'd built it together. As the sun started to set, turning the sky pink and orange, Mia looked up at all of them with her serious face. "We should make a promise," she announced. "What kind of promise?" Elena asked. "That we'll always be a family, no matter what happens, even when things are hard. We'll stay together." Lily nodded enthusiastically. "Like a forever promise." Caleb looked at Elena and saw his own emotions reflected in her eyes, love and hope, and a little bit of fear at the weight of such a promise, but also certainty, because they'd already proven they could keep this promise, had already chosen each other through custody battles and grief and the messy reality of blending broken pieces into something whole. "Okay," Elena said, her voice strong. "We promise. Forever family." "Forever family," Caleb echoed. "Forever family," the girls shouted together, then dissolved into giggles. They stayed on the beach until the sun disappeared completely. Four people who'd found each other in the wreckage of loss and built something neither perfect nor simple, but utterly, completely real. A family not born but chosen, not flawless but committed, not fearless but brave enough to try anyway. As they walked back to the car, Lily slipped her hand into Caleb's on one side and Mia's on the other, creating a chain of connection. Elena took Mia's other hand, and Caleb reached across to complete the circle, all four of them linked together. "Daddy," Lily said as they walked, "I think Mommy would really like Elena." "Yeah, Bug, I think she really would." And Caleb meant it. Sarah had loved fiercely and wanted even more fiercely for her family to thrive. She would have loved Elena's strength, Mia's sweetness, the way they'd all found each other and refused to let go. She would have called it exactly what it was, a second chance at joy, hard-won and precious. The beach at dawn had belonged to ghosts, to the weight of grief and the struggle to breathe through loss. But the beach at dusk belonged to them, to the living, to the ones brave enough to believe that endings could become beginnings, that broken people could build beautiful things, that love was infinite and came in endless forms. They'd survived. More than that, they'd learned to live again. Not by forgetting what they'd lost, but by making space for what they'd found. And that, Caleb thought as he loaded sleepy children into the car and caught Elena's smile in the rearview mirror, that was everything. The road ahead would have challenges. Derek would likely cause more problems. Grief would return in waves. Integrating two families would require patience and grace. But they'd face it together, these four souls who'd found each other when they needed it most, and chosen to build something lasting from the wreckage of their separate storms. 6 months later, on a warm spring morning, Caleb stood in Elena's kitchen making coffee while she packed Mia's lunch. It was a Tuesday, ordinary and unremarkable, except for the way Elena hummed while she worked, the way Mia and Lily argued playfully over who got the last strawberry, the way Caleb felt completely profoundly home. "I've been thinking," Elena said, not looking up from the sandwich she was making. "Dangerous activity," Caleb teased. "Funny, no, I've been thinking about what's next for us. Where we go from here." Caleb felt his heart skip. And I think maybe we should stop living in separate houses. Not rush it, but start talking about what combining households would actually look like. You're ready for that? I'm terrified of it, but I'm more terrified of wasting time being cautious when I could be building the life I want. Elena finally looked up, her eyes bright. "I want to wake up every morning with you. I want the girls to have the stability of one home. I want to stop pretending we're not already a family and just make it official." Caleb crossed to her and pulled her close. "Then let's do it. Let's make it official." The girls cheered from the table, clearly having been listening to every word. Lily jumped up and down, already planning room arrangements. Mia asked if they could get a dog now that they'd be a real family. "We're already a real family," Elena corrected gently. "We have been since that first day on the beach when your daddy stood up to Derek. Since Lily and Mia decided to be best friends. Since we all chose each other." "So we can get a dog?" Mia pressed. Everyone laughed, and Caleb felt the last piece of his carefully guarded heart click into place. This was his life now, chaotic mornings and negotiations about pets, and a woman who challenged him to be brave. This was what Sarah had wanted for him, what she'd known he'd need even when he couldn't see it himself. He'd lost everything once, the love of his life, the future they'd planned, the certainty that good things could last. But he'd learned something crucial in the losing and the rebuilding, that life was bigger than one story, one love, one chance at happiness. That hearts could break and heal again, each time in different ways, each time learning to hold more. He wasn't replacing Sarah. He was honoring her by doing what she'd asked, living fully, loving freely, giving Lily the rich, complicated, beautiful life she deserved. And in doing so, he'd found something he never expected, a second chance, a second family, a second love that was different from the first but no less real. That was the gift hidden in the grief, the treasure buried in the wreckage. Not that loss didn't matter, but that it didn't have to be the end of the story. That survival could become thriving, that broken could become whole in new configurations, that families could be built from courage and choice and the stubborn refusal to let fear win. As Caleb drove the girls to school that morning, Elena in the passenger seat, the four of them singing off-key to the radio. He thought about the man who'd walked that beach 3 months after burying his wife, drowning in grief and searching for air. He thought about the woman in the red bikini who'd been too scared to enter the water, too broken to believe in safety. They'd come so far. They'd survived their separate storms and found each other in the wreckage and built something neither could have imagined at the start. And they'd keep building, day by day, choice by choice, love by stubborn love. The beach at dawn had belonged to ghosts and grief and the struggle just to keep breathing. But this morning, driving through ordinary traffic with his extraordinary family, belonged to them, the living, the healing, the ones who'd learned that hope could survive anything if you were brave enough to keep choosing it. And Caleb Turner, widower, father, survivor, and now builder of second chances, chose hope. Every single day, he chose it. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.